Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Abington School Committee meeting. Tonight is Wednesday, July 29th, 2020. Before we continue the discussion of the draft fall school reopening guidance and plan, along with the newest DESE guidelines, I'd like to just have everyone on the Zoom meeting introduce themselves to the community. I'll start, then we'll go through the school committee, then to Peter and his staff, the high school, all the way down to the preschool, and then to any community members that are out there. So my name is Wendy Happel. I'm the chair of the school committee. Lisa?
I'm Lisa Augusta. I'm the vice chair of the school committee.
I'm Jackie Abrams. I'm the secretary of the school committee.
Chris?
I'm Chris Coyle, member of the school committee.
Danielle?
Danielle's muted.
Thank you. Danielle Grafton, member of the school committee.
Peter Schaefer, school superintendent, and then going to the high school administration.
Thank you. Jonathan Bourne, principal of Abington High School.
Good evening, everybody. Jessie Clements, assistant principal at the high school.
Mary Sullivan, principal for a few more days at the high school.
Pat McCurtain, principal at Abington Middle School.
Sarah Sawyers, assistant principal at Abington Middle School.
I don't see Jonathan Hawes from the Woodsdale.
Oh, he's here.
There he is.
Try again, Jonathan.
Jonathan Haas, Woodsdale School Principal.
Chris Boston, Beaverbrook.
And then it just leaves Marty. No, Laura, I'm sorry. Laura.
I saw Julie.
I wasn't sure about Julie.
The assistant principal at the Beaverbrook. Maybe she just lost her connection, but she was here a moment ago. And then Laura Monachino is here from the early education program. Julie just popped back on. Sorry, Julie, I already introduced you. And then I think that other than Felicia, right?
Felicia Michelle, assistant superintendent.
James.
Hi, James Robbins, director of student services.
And then we've got Sherry Fedorowicz.
Hi, Sherry Fedorowicz, director of curriculum instruction and assessment.
And technology, Rich Bykowski is always helping us and listening, and he's here.
Marty Golightly, Abington Public Health Director.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. I think it's just very helpful for the community. So there's actually one more thing, and it's a couple minutes long, so I hope I don't make anyone aggravated, but I just wanted to say a couple of things. And so the first I'd like to do is take a minute to say thank you. Thank you to Peter, Felicia, Sherry, James, Teresa, and everyone in the front office for staying late, answering calls and emails after your workday is done, and for constantly being there for all of us throughout this pandemic and summer. I know how hard you all work, how much you care for our students, and how much you all love our little town. I applaud your dedication. I couldn't ask for a finer group of people to be working with throughout all of this. I'd also like to thank the principals, vice principals, and their staff. The past 5 months have not been easy or ideal. The principals and vice principals have constantly been available and have offered a lot of insight and ideas, as well as being an integral part of many thoughtful conversations. I'd like to thank our teachers. I'm grateful for the care and impactful instruction you have all given our students over the years. I know last year ended abruptly. It wasn't easy, and there was no great ways to still teach once we went remote, because nothing was in place for an instant change like that, since none of us have ever been in a situation so sudden before. I know you all did the very best you could. I know this summer has been stressful for most of you. I understand that many of you are in different places on how you would implement the new school year, and I know some of you will not be happy with the final direction chosen. A few of you may have to make significant changes to your home life or even your profession, and I want to say I'm sorry that at this stage in your life and career, you may have to weigh risks versus benefits. I'd also like to thank the members of the school committee for all your effort and the time you volunteer on this committee and throughout the community. None of us to make the kinds of decisions ahead of us. I know how dedicated you all are and how serious you take our responsibilities. I'm so incredibly thankful to have open communication and dialogue with each of you. I'm proud to work with the four of you, and I could not ask for a more diligent group of people to represent our town. I'd like to take a minute and pat our parents, grandparents, and guardians on the back. Thank you for always trying, for going out to help and protect our children. I know things are crazy and stressful. I know your minds are all over the place, especially when trying to work, feed your family, and make the very best decisions possible for your own kids. Personally, I have been stressed enough to cry and mad enough to scream some days, and at times I wonder if I'm doing the right thing. So I just want to take a second to remind you that you are a good mom, you are a good dad, you are a great grandparent, and a very caring guardian. I know we are all doing the very best we can. It takes a village, and I'm so glad Bingtown has so many loving, helpful members of the community that will do what they can to always take care of our neighbor or a friend's child or even the dog wandering alone down the street. Please, I just want you all to know whatever decision you make for your child, it is the right one. Don't let society, your family, or your friends make you feel any different. And lastly, and most importantly, I'd like to say a few words to our students. These kids, our children, have been impacted the most in so many ways, but have had little to no say in any of it. You have all lost out on semis, proms, school trips, vacations, friendships, love interests, sports, and goodbyes. There has been no proper closure for you. I know it probably doesn't seem so at times, but I hope you all know how much your parents in the school system care about you. I know everyone is offering different ideas and opinions, but please truly understand we all want what is best for you, and we want to protect you and guide you in the right direction. If we could give you anything in the world, it would be these last 5 months back. Speaking for myself, and as an adult, this pandemic has been very hard to navigate at times, and some days hard to get through. I can't imagine the pressure, anxiety, and worry that has been on your minds, and I can't say that it will get any easier. All I can say is that we love you, and we thank you for your patience with us. Please, if anyone is struggling, reach out to a friend, a family member, a counselor, or even an old teacher from years ago if you have any questions or feel lost or alone. I'm sorry you all have to see more than you should at your age. And some of you have even had to grow up a lot quicker by helping out around the house or with a younger sibling. And a lot of you have been left to your own devices by being on your own the past few months while your parents worked. I promise you that my adults I just referred to throughout this speech are trying to do what is best for you. We are all here for you. We all want you to succeed. We have all pretty much lived our best lives already, and we are here to help and encourage you and make things as easy as they can be for you. I promise that we will do better. We will get you the best education our district can provide during this time, and we will all get through this together. That's all I have to say. So Peter, would you like to start?
Not after you spoke so well and eloquently, and I think communicated so perfectly to open a meeting. I want to thank you for starting us that way. I know I probably speak for everybody who heard that.
Good job, Wendy.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks. I love all you guys.
So I will kick in. Because we have a lot of information, and I know the committee wants to spend time with thoughtful deliberation and Q&A. So I'll just start it. So if I could have, we have a PowerPoint presentation that's been posted online, and I believe there are multiple ways that people are watching this. If you can't see this PowerPoint presentation for any reason, it is online, and you can flip through it as I talk on our main page. On this slide, I just want to do a very brief history of where we are and what we're trying to accomplish here tonight. Just in case you missed the first meeting in Massachusetts, I think everybody knows that school committees have been asked to submit 3 initial plans for the reopening of school. Within those plans, there are a variety of ways that districts could go. Generally, the 3 plans are all in person, a hybrid model, which is half the students coming one day, half the students coming another day, while one half is in session, the other half is learning remotely, and then a full remote. And then the committee is asked to please provide to the Department of Education the preference that the district is moving in. And this is all, I want to highlight two things. This is all underscored by the fact that it's July 29th. And if this pandemic has taught us anything, it's that there are unpredictable things that will happen, and we need to be ready to be as agile and nimble as possible. And so things could change. And that also what you are hearing is subject to collective bargaining with the people that will implement this plan, the employees of the Abington Public Schools. The other thing, so that vote, that preference, that polled preference tonight will be recorded. But then also on August 4th, the plan is for the committee to meet and make a decision on which of these three plans will be implemented. That is then due to the Department of Education. We will do that work based on that vote. And then I want you to know that's going to be the plan for us to return. We will plan around that with those two things I want to underscore again. That will be as of August 4th. The virus has taught us that things change, and that will also be subject to collective bargaining prior to implementation. The last thing is that people may be aware, the Department of Education has provided that school years, rather than being 180 days, will be can be 170. And then that the school years, though, would start by the 16th, no matter how we return, of September. So at the next meeting, I'll also be asking the members to consider a school start of September 16th. So no matter how we enter, we'll be able to best be ready for our students when they return, so we can do the best work possible. So if I could have the next slide. Importantly, I want to start, now that I've done the history and the recap, with these foundational elements. When it comes to us discussing reopening, there are hundreds of decisions, and each decision has multiple facets to it, thousands of decisions. Safety is most important in all of those considerations. The well-being of our students and staff is our primary responsibility. Every effort is going to be made to maximize the safest environment possible. The next most important thing is the social, emotional, and the mental well-being of our school community. We are in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, and unprecedented, epic, historic are words that are overused in our society. They are not overused when we're talking about what we're dealing with. And we understand as an organization that after safety, the next most important thing that we can do is take care of and be flexible and nurture our school community. And third will be academics. And perhaps academics are a part of that social, emotional, and mental well-being, because it gets people back into exciting and healthy and active routines that are productive and emotionally and mentally stable experiences and well-structured. But they are a tool to get at what's more important, the social, emotional, and mental piece. Next slide, please. This is a repeat for reference for people with our initial guidance that we received. If I could have and that really covers what I've already talked about in terms of what we're required to do in person, hybrid, or remote learning. If I could have the next slide. These are new resources that were promulgated since our last meeting. And we continue to say we get new guidance. This is evidence of that. So just in that short period of time from our last meeting, you can see here that there are 4 other resources that people can access. The meeting tonight is really about these elements. We don't want to repeat what we've already covered. These are additional to what we've already covered. So that's what we're going to dive into tonight. Next slide, please. These are the resources that we've already provided to you, but we wanted to have a library for people to reference if they would like. And we want to go, we've done quite a bit of surveying in the Abington Public Schools to get input from the entire school community. And we've gotten input in a variety of ways. This is one of them, and Dr. Fedorovitz is going to walk us through the most recent results compared to previous results.
Great. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to give you the results of the follow-up entry survey that was provided by parents and Abington educators, which is inclusive of both faculty and staff. Next slide. This chart compares data between the July 14th and July 28th survey for both parents and faculty and staff. There were 826 parents that responded to the first survey and 107 that responded to the second survey. 195 faculty and staff responded to the first survey, and 171 responded to the second survey. The preferred model for returning to school in the fall for parents is as follows. 40% of parents had a preference for returning full-time in person, and 39% preferred a hybrid. The difference between the 40% and 39% was 13 people. 19% of parents opted for full remote learning. The preferred model for returning to school in the fall for faculty and staff is that 46% had a preference for full remote learning and 45% preferred a hybrid model. The difference between the 45 and 46% was one person. Compared to the first survey, parent preference to return full-time in person decreased by 20%, and hybrid and remote models increased by 13% and 6% respectively. Compared to the first survey, faculty and staff preference to return full-time in person decreased by 27%, and hybrid and remote increased by 15% and 18% respectively. Next slide, please. We did a deeper dive into the hybrid model question. We used a hybrid model for returning in the fall. 32% of parents and 33% of faculty and staff preferred a full week rotation of 1 week on and 1 week off in-person learning. 34% of parents and 38% of faculty and staff preferred a split week by half week. So for example, kids in cohort A would have in-person learning at the beginning of the week, Monday and Tuesday, then remote Wednesday through Friday. Cohort B would have a remote Monday through Wednesday, and then in person Thursday and Friday. 20% of parents and 22% of teachers preferred a split rotation by every other day. For both parents as well and as faculty and staff, both shifted to a preference from full week rotation in the first survey to a split week rotation by half week in the second survey by 20% and 19% respectively. The results of the survey helped us to inform discussion. And as a reminder, the AEA, or Abington Educators Association, is also jointly engaged with educators and staff to collect information throughout the summer. I know that their data reflects differently than this. I want to thank all the parents and all the faculty and staff who took this survey. And are there any questions at this time with the results?
So I believe with not hearing or seeing any questions, unless wanting to go, otherwise Felicia is going to talk about the next section.
I actually think it's Mr. Bourne.
Oh, I apologize.
Thank you, Rich. In addition is what Peter Schaefer mentioned, that on Friday, the state released additional guidance for specific courses. Rich, can you move to the next slide, please? There's a strong emphasis regarding a full academic experience for all students, which included the arts, electives, physical education, and other specials. In short, there were restrictions on indoor music, chorus, drama, and some aspects of physical education. It basically outlined enhanced safety measures due to increased respiration and sharing of equipment in those courses. So for example, chorus, singing, musical theater, brass, and woodwind must be outdoors or done remotely. It was very specific to say that these courses should not be held indoors. Rich, can you move to the next slide? Physical education, for example, also said, courses should be outdoors 10 feet with no mask, outdoors 6 feet with masks, or indoors 6 feet with masks. And next slide, please, too, Rich, that's spelled out here. No physical contact in any of these sports. So this would all be individual weight-based trainings, for example, for physical education. In a brief dialogue with the Wellness and New art director today, this is mostly manageable from a high school level with the exception of music outside. In short, this creates an additional space and schedule constraint for all the buildings. Where we were looking last week, for example, about using outdoor spaces, period, for mass breaks and courses. This now puts a premium on good weather and outdoor space for music and physical education classes. And I do want to I may have misspoke if I said that the electives were easy at the high school. That's actually not accurate. I apologize. I was thinking more about supplies and sharing supplies. There's also guidance about that some restrictions about commonly used, equipment, either in wellness or in musical classes, and other specific details about classroom setups. So for example, no semicircles in chorus, and all of that is influenced by the new guidance that came out. Rich, next slide. That information is on that. Excuse me, pardon me. That was the end of that information in short.
Are there any questions from the committee? If everyone's okay, I will go on to the new guidance that we received on facilities. Next slide, please. We discussed some of this at our last meeting, but I'll just review some of the, if you want to say, highlights. That classrooms will be cleared of any non-essential items or furniture. We'll be looking to use outside spaces for classes, breaks, meals, and other activities as feasible. The minimum distance between chairs is required to be 3 feet from seat edge to seat edge. I can tell you in a full all students in scenario, seats would be 3 feet apart in almost all spaces. And in a hybrid scenario, seats will be more than 3, 6 in some cases, but between 4 and 6 in all cases. There's also been a number of questions around plexiglass and the use of plexiglass around desks, and directly from the DESE guidance that there are pros and cons to the use of plexiglass barriers. In general, we do not recommend setting up plexiglass barriers in regular classrooms, since they represent an additional high-risk surface to clean and disinfect. Next slide, please. Each school will be required to have what's being called a medical waiting room, which is separate from the nurse's office. That's an area where students who present with any COVID-19 symptoms will be separated as they await to be picked up. That space, again, is away from the nurse's office and will have to be supervised. And all students in that space are required to be 6 feet apart and always wearing a mask, and even for grades K and 1. We're anticipating having multiple entry and exit points into each building, and the possibility of staggered arrival and dismissal times, so that students, as they arrive and dismiss, can keep a physical distance of 6 feet throughout the travel to exiting the building or entering the building. Next slide, please. There's been guidance on recess, and as in entering other areas or exiting other areas, there'll be hand sanitizer or hand wash will need to be used upon entering or leaving recess. Consideration of outdoor spaces to separate cohorts. When possible, cleaning and disinfecting high-touch surfaces made of plastic or metal in between cohort use. So that's playground equipment. And if outdoors, and maintaining at least 6 feet of distance students may remove their masks as an unmasked time. Again, 6 feet of distance and outside. Students may remove their masks. Next slide, please. There will be hand sanitizing stations throughout the buildings. In each classroom, there'll be hand sanitizer at entries and exits to the building, in meal distribution areas and in eating areas. And it's also may be important to note that the guidance has allowed less than 3 feet of distance between students if they're washing their hands, as long as their masks are worn and students are not facing one another. Therefore, all sinks in our restroom facilities will be able to be used even if students are closer than 3 feet. Next slide, please. The hand dryers that are located in the restrooms at the pre-K middle high school have been disconnected, and we've installed disposable paper towel dispensers, as has been recommended by the DESE guidance, and lockers will not be used because of the physical distancing that's required to get in and out of lockers. Next slide, please. Some operational protocols. These are based on our the DESE guidance that we received last week. Next slide, please. We're in the process of writing up or developing a detailed cleaning protocol that will be used in all of our buildings, and included in the protocol are cleaning and disinfecting daily, cleaning high-touch surfaces, disinfecting high-touch surfaces multiple times, handrails, door handles, for example. Desks will be disinfected daily, and where situations when students move between classrooms, the cleaning of the desks will have to take place. And again, it talks about outdoor play areas made of plastic and metal to be disinfected. Next slide. Sharing of items and materials is discouraged, but when they must be shared, though, they must be cleaned before being used by other students. And there are new guidance on library books, and library books may be checked out if students clean their hands before and after use. Books and paper-based materials are not considered a high risk for transmission and don't need additional cleaning procedures. Next slide, please. In the operational protocols, DESE addressed HVAC systems, and I've made note of the HVAC systems that we have in our school buildings. At the pre-K middle and high school, we've made adjustments to the system to continuously bring in the maximum amount of outdoor fresh air into the building. And it should be noted that for this system to be efficient and effective, windows at the pre-K middle high school should be left closed in order to have the most efficient system in that school. At Woodsdale and Beaver Brook, however, classrooms have univents, and univents are a different type of system. But this summer, Jason and the maintenance crew and the custodial crews have been inspected, cleaned, and all have been installed with new air filters. Exhaust fans univents pull in fresh air, exhaust fans send out the classroom air. They've been inspected and are confirmed to be in working condition. And it's also recommended by DESE to open windows and where feasible to use fans near windows to increase outdoor air intake. Some other guidance, DESE guidance has indicated that no visitors or volunteers will be allowed into the buildings, and visitors that are necessary for drop-off or pickup of students or student materials must wear a mask, and they'll be limited to the office areas only.
Alicia, can we stop maybe?
Yeah.
Would you mind stopping there before we get into the transportation?
Not at all. Now take a breath.
Yeah. Okay. I just have a couple questions and comments, I guess.
Sure.
I don't want to get too far into the slides and have to ask you to go back too far.
That's okay.
I want to draw our attention to slide 2, I think it is, with the maybe the priorities or our our
Slide 2.
it's just the one, I only want the members of the audience who are listening to really notice the order. Sorry, it is our goals in the order that they are laid out. I don't think you call them goals, you call them.
I believe it's the second slide. Of
This
the
is it,
presentation.
yep. So typically in public education, yes, safety is always important. Yes, emotional and mental well-being is important. But when we think about school, a lot of us or the community typically think about academics and athletics and arts. And you're gonna hear me talk later about unworkable guidelines put upon us by the state. And I just want people to understand that the order of these elements for reopening is essentially the order in which things will take priority. I don't mean to state the obvious. I just want to draw our attention to some of the facilities guidelines, the recess guidelines, and you're going to get into the transportation guidelines in a minute. But by the time we make sure that we are following these guidelines and making sure people are okay and happy being there despite the guidelines, this last bullet is third on our list, and we hope that it will happen, but we'll see. So if you could go to facility guidance slide, learning spaces, I just want to draw attention to a few areas. So these are the guidelines that the state puts out in relation to learning spaces. When you say clear classrooms of any non-essential items or furniture, I just want to clarify that what will be left in classrooms are essentially desks and chairs and a teacher's desk and a computer. So anything else one would be accustomed to seeing in a classroom will not be there, including rugs and things we've talked about before. Plexiglass. Initially, when we explored options like going back in person and some other options that we talked about tonight, we'll talk about tonight, plexiglass seemed like a feasible, hopeful option for how we could possibly get within 3 feet of students as the educator. And you can see that in the most recent guidelines that just came out, they are now not recommending us or allowing us to set up plexiglass barriers at places like small group tables and such. If we go to the medical waiting room guidance, I just want to ask a question I already know the answer to, but I want to make sure we all understand. This medical waiting room we are guided to be sure that it's a separate space from the nurse's office or a regular space for providing medical care. The rhetorical fresh question that I have is like, where are those spaces in our schools? And I know that we will find them because we'll be ordered to find them. But so I guess the more important question is, who will man those spaces? We're not getting any additional nurses. So if the nurse is taking care of regular health issues or any run-of-the-mill reasons why children go to see the nurse, who do you foresee, and I really am curious about this answer, have you thought about who will man this separate space?
What I've heard from the buildings in terms of the plan today is that the principals and the assistant principals know what you're saying, who's going to want to do that, and they've volunteered in their plans. They're like, well, we're going to do it because they're good soldiers and they know that it's going to be difficult to find someone to do that. So that's going to take them out of the other work that they need to do. And I think you can see in this presentation, there's more work than ever before.
Okay, can we go to recess? This is something I just want to make sure people understand. If you go through the 81 pages that I believe I could have miscounted, but there's about 81 pages that have come over the last few weeks from the state to districts in regards to guidelines, and they continue to change. So originally, kids were going to get 2 mask breaks a day. And in the guidance, they recommend that lunch will be one of them. They'll take their mask off to eat their lunch. And then the other suggested mask break is recess. They'll take their mask off to have recess. I just want to draw our attention to the newest information that now states masks, if outdoors and we maintain at least 6 feet of distance, consider using recess as unmasked time. So what that's telling me, as somebody who often supervises recess, is that if I want recess to be a mask break, it's going to be up to me and my colleagues to make sure that all of the children who are outside at recess stay 6 feet apart from each other while they're playing and interacting socially. Am I reading that correctly?
100%.
Yes, yes.
So if we're unable, so we have two choices. We can put them out to recess and tell them to all stay 6 feet apart, and then they get to take an air break or a mask break, or we let them play, but then we lose that second mask break because they'll have to keep their masks on, or find an alternative mask break.
Correct. Correct.
The other thing is while we're on the topic of mask breaks, they're meant to happen outside. I never saw anything about inside mask breaks unless we could find a way to keep people 6 feet apart. So have they given any guidance about what to do in New England during the dead of winter when we're not allowed to send kids out below 35 degrees, how we provide them the mask break?
The guess would be we would have to use those large spaces that we have that we're already scheduling other things in to try to accommodate a program of studies with kids in attendance. That's a bad answer, but that's the answer.
No, that's okay. Okay, I have another transportation question, but we haven't gotten there yet. So thanks, sorry.
Now, are there other questions on facilities operations?
I just, for the purpose of being clear, could we share with people, you had talked about staggered arrivals and dismissals from school, and with a full in-person, Felicia, could you just talk about that? Or is that coming up in the transportation guidance slide anyway?
It's not in there, but it probably fits in there.
Okay.
So, all right, I just have to find the spot again. So we also received additional, and I'll try to go, I know I kind of flew through those, so. We received additional guidance on transportation. We spoke last week about all staff and students will have to wear masks at all times on our buses, regardless of their age or grade. We're being allowed to have one student per seat or bench, and there'll be alternating sides in each row. And there's a picture coming up that better describes that. And children from the same family may share a bench. All windows on the bus will be open unless due to extreme weather that they can't be. Students will be assigned a bus and a seat. And with the guidelines around seating on a bus, the buses that we use in Abington are 71 passenger buses, and we're allowed to have 23 students on a bus or run the bus at 32% capacity. And as you may know, if you have a child that takes the bus, our buses run at between 75 and 100% capacity on any given day, on any given run. The next slide. So this is a picture of a 71 passenger bus, and you'll notice that the blue dot is the driver, and the red dots are where students will sit. So they'll be alternating assigned seats on the bus. Those are seats that at the elementary level have 3 students in them, at the middle and high school level have 2 or 3 students, and now there'll be 1. So I think this is a probably good time to talk a little bit about what will happen should we bring all students back in terms of transportation. Abington has a bus fleet that we have under contract with our transportation provider. There are not other pieces of equipment that can be put into utilization in Abington or other communities for that matter. There's a limited number of buses, and more importantly, there's a limited number of drivers. Every year, bus companies have difficulty getting drivers even for equipment that they have. So we are limited to the number of buses that we have had in previous years. And at transporting at a 32% capacity, that means that we will have to run double runs for our Woodsdale, Beaverbrook, and middle school schools. So as you know, we're required to transport students in grades K to 6 who live more than 2 miles from the school. And then we also have a pay-as-you-ride program for families who don't have alternate ways to get their students to school. And using those two student counts, we are much lower in our paid transportation to date. We have approximately 316 families have paid. In a typical year, we have almost 800. So I'm anticipating that once we have a model, that there may be more families that either choose to have the bus or I think there'll be more families that may choose to take the bus. We sent out a survey, a questionnaire actually, last week or a week and a half ago around those families that have mandated transportation that were required to transport. In previous years, you can go to the next slide, Rich. In previous years, we reserved a seat on the bus for those families that are mandated. This year, because we have such significant restrictions, we're asking families to let us know if they plan to put their child on the bus. And the reason for that is, with the information that we have today, based on those families that have signed up for the bus, those families that have indicated that they will put their students on a bus if they're mandated, and the students who have yet to the families who have yet to let us know whether they plan to put their students on the bus and are mandated, we'll have to run double runs, like I said, at the middle school, Woodsdale, and Beaverbrook. So what that means is a bus full of 23 students, actually at Woodsdale, at the Beaverbrook, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 buses will drop off students, and then those students will go into school, and then we'll have to go back out with 8 buses and pick up the remaining students, 23 on a bus, that haven't been picked up yet. So those students will get to school late. Same thing at the Woodsdale. Those students will get to school late. Those 6 buses of students, so approximately 150 students will be coming into school late. At the middle school, because those buses are used for the middle school and then are then used for the Beaverbrook, the middle school students will have to be picked up earlier, dropped off at school, have to supervise them, 7 buses worth of students, so 170 kids will have to be dropped off, and then those buses, they'll have to wait for school to start, then those buses will have to go out and get the remaining students. And the reverse will have to happen in the afternoon. We'll have to, for the middle school, dismiss students early because that equipment is then needed for Beaverbrook. So students would be dismissed early, get a ride home, the buses would come back and get the second group of students. At the Woodsdale and Beaverbrook, a first round of students would be dismissed. They would take the bus home. Then 8 at the Beaverbrook and 6 buses at the Woodsdale would have to come back and pick up those students that didn't fit on the first run of buses. How is that for confusing?
And so just to make sure people clarify something, these buses will not be able to drop off earlier than the start time because we will not have the faculty and staff there to appropriately supervise, especially given the current restrictions and guidelines. In previous years, every year, we want kids, as much as we can manage, because we're doing a breakfast program for kids, and you have a couple of people in the cafeteria so kids can come early. We will not be able to do that at all under these conditions. So when we talk about this staggered arrival and then staggered dismissal, both of these on either end cut into the school day for children, while parents are simultaneously dropping off, and we're trying to stagger their arrival and departure also.
Alicia, this guidance that you just explained, is that the guidance for if we're back full in person, or is that also what it will be like if we're hybrid model as well?
Great question. So the guidance is the same. The impact of the guidance is different.
Okay.
So if we bring everybody back, 2,100 students, then that would be the impact. If we brought half the students back, approximately half the students back, we would not need to run double runs of buses because we would be transporting half the number of students.
And the rough estimate on the staggered arrival and dismissal, we don't know because we haven't lived it. The rough estimate is about 45 minutes. That could swing either way. It's going to swing more than that potentially, especially as we start. So that eats away on either end by 45 minutes of each part of the day, arrival and dismissal, for full in-person.
Correct.
So I have one other question. So if it's run as double runs and however it works, is the bus driver required to disinfect the bus in the middle of this before the new students get on? And how is that going to impact the timing of how these buses can run and be on or not on schedule?
That's a great question. The guidance for transportation doesn't specifically address that, but based on the guidance for in school and having to disinfect desks between students, I absolutely anticipate that buses will need to be disinfected in between runs,
okay,
which adds to time.
Alicia, can I ask a question about the survey?
Sure.
First, I just want to, anybody who received the mandated email and hasn't replied back, I'd ask you to do so if as soon as possible to help get an accurate. But is there, so I don't know this, I'm asking, was there a similar thing sent out to those that have paid already? Or is there a way to communicate with them to try to find out? Because I mean, to me, this is one of the biggest, this is one of the toughest sticking points with everything that's going on right now because of what it will affect on learning. So I just, I don't want people who maybe didn't see an email to necessarily bump things one way or the other. Do you know what I mean?
I do. So we've had a number of requests since the last school committee meeting for refunds, and where we are processing refunds for people who have paid and have changed their mind. I anticipate, or I plan to send out another email next week around both for people who want, once we have a model, the families who want transportation or are choosing not to take their transportation. We are planning to call or communicate with every family who's mandated who has not replied to our questionnaire, because we really need to know that number, and then give an opportunity for families who want to pay to ride to either remove themselves from the pay to ride or add on to the pay to ride. But it's hard to send out emails to kind of two different groups of people asking the same types of questions. So, and I think once people know what the model, we anticipate the model to be, that may help drive their transportation decision.
Is there a way they can, let's say they make a decision they want to reach out, is there a way to let you know without having to wait for a survey or
Yeah, they can email, they can absolutely email me.
Okay.
Yep. And DESE, this is a DESE recommendation, and I would say an Abington Public Schools recommendation, that due to, regardless of the model, hybrid or 100% in person, that due to the limited capacity on the school buses, we encourage families to make alternative plans to transport their students to and from school. And because transportation is such a significant issue.
Thank you, Felicia.
Sure, thank you. And there's, I think, one more slide on transportation.
I think Wendy was, Wendy, you can, I think you need to unmute, please.
Sorry.
I'm unmuted. Thank you.
I didn't see it.
didn't realize that there's one more slide. I'll wait till you get through this last slide, and then I do have a couple of questions regarding transportation.
Sure.
Thanks.
So there's one more slide. This is what we were just talking about with Chris, and about asking people to let us know what their preferences around transportation. And although the applications were due July 1st, if you want the bus, please let us know you want the bus. And if you have paid or are mandated and would like to change that status, also let us know. And just developing the routes is going to be very challenging this year, even more challenging than in previous years, based on a lack of confidence in our ridership at this point. Questions?
Yes.
Okay.
I was wondering about remote. So how will the contract work with the bus company? If we do go remote, and will we lose any money? Will the town lose money, or will it go to next year? How will that work?
That's another great question. So I don't know if we spoke about this in the spring. We have a bus contract with First Student. And last year, so our contract is for the equipment, that we know that we have the equipment, that the equipment is inspected, that the equipment is insured, that is in good working condition, that drivers are licensed appropriately and appropriately trained, and that we have a depot and a maintenance crew that's in Whitman, that's where our Abington buses go. So if we were to go remote, we would have to renegotiate our bus, we have the potential to renegotiate pieces of the bus contract with our bus contract provider. And because of the fluidness, if you will, of the possibility this year of being in one model, changing to another model, then maybe going back to the initial model, we would want to make sure that our bus equipment remained insured, inspected, the drivers remained available to drive, because those decisions and the changing from one model to another could happen rather quickly. So last year, there's about 50 districts in Massachusetts that contract with First Student. And I led a group of 12 districts throughout the state. I was the kind of lead negotiator, and we negotiated with First Student around an agreement of the portion of the bus contract that we would pay in order to reserve the right to use that equipment and have that equipment available and ready. And so I think it was we settled at 30% of the bus contract, because our bus contract is more than just the road miles that they drive. And we would have liked to pay more, and First Student would have liked or pay less, and First Student wanted us to pay more. So it was, I think, in the end, a pretty fair negotiations. I don't know what this year, what will happen in that regard, because of the fluidness of being in school, or the possibility of not being in school, and then the possibility of returning to school. But negotiations of any service is something that is on the table. That answer your question?
Yes, thank you. So one other kind of question I have is, while I was at home for a little bit, I saw on the news that Chelmsford has decided to go giving the bus for students that are under 2 miles, and anyone that is above grade 6. Is that any consideration for us to save money by only supporting bus transportation for K through 6 and over the 2 mile limit?
So I can tell you that as of this afternoon, there were 316 families that have chosen to pay to have their child on a bus. I believe that in different communities, there's other methods to get to school for families without having any public transportation, for example, in Abington, and not having neighborhood schools, if you will, that it would be challenging to not, it's a school committee decision to not have the other students on the bus, but I think it will be challenging for at least 316 families to get their children to school if it's not in the school bus. Are there other questions? I think I just want to, kind of to Jackie's point earlier, whether it's the operational guidance or the facilities guidance or the transportation guidance, regardless of the way in which we come back to school in the fall, nothing about school is going to look the same as when we left on March 12th, whether it be ridership on the bus, at recess, in the classroom, at meal times. And that's, I just want to make sure that people understand that.
And Felicia, sorry, the other part of that, am I echoing?
A little bit.
The other part of that would just be like when we talk about the guidelines. So for the bus, for example, one of the guidelines says that the bus will be like ventilated or the windows will remain open, weather permitting, period. What doesn't follow is any guidance on when weather's not in our favor. Do we just pretend like, oh, that doesn't really matter now because it's December, January, and February, or we keep it open, but it's cold. Yeah, no big deal. Okay, but how about torrential rain? Like, so do we not open the bus hatch and we just, it's okay on those days? Like, that's the part that's hard to, they're not providing additional guidelines saying, okay, this is what you need to do. And if these situations occur, this is what to do. Am I just missing it? Or like, what would you say to somebody who asked, what do you do on rainy days? What do you do when it's snowing and freezing?
I think I think you're right, Jackie. I think, for example, the bus windows being open, the DESE guidance lead me in my interpretation to believe that it's safer with the windows open, but it is safe. And again, I use that term, I'm not a medical professional, but my interpretation would be it's safer with the windows open, just the same as in classrooms. And if the windows aren't open and people are masked and physically distanced, then there's a sense of safeness.
And I guess those days are not as many, right? So a few days here and there in that situation is considered okay.
I understand.
Without further questions, if there are any, I'll wait, but I think I'm up next. So I'll just make sure we're good. I can't see all the numbers at once. I want to make sure. Okay, I think I've checked in. So we spent a lot of time talking about in person, and really most of both of the last two school committee meetings are about in person and the restrictions around in person. So a question that people are going to ask is, why are we highlighting the hybrid piece? It's because I have a responsibility to the committee to make a recommendation. And so I want to talk a little bit about the hybrid models, because my recommendation tonight is going to be for this July submission that we designate hybrid as the preference for the Abington Public Schools. So I just want to spend some time talking about that. The definition of a hybrid means students would alternate between in-person and remote learning. So I think people understand the teacher would have half the students in front of them, and while those students are in front of them, the other half of the students would be learning remotely. So it would not be, the online that takes place for students would not be as interactive because the teacher will have students in front of them, half the students in front of them during the school day. There are many variations of a hybrid model. There are three that we've really talked about so far. The first one is 2 days in person and 3 days remote. Another one is every other day in person and remote on Fridays. Another one is 4 days in person, remote on Fridays, 5 days remote. The reason that each of these in each week loses a day is because the teachers have kids in front of them during the other 4 days of the week. They need a day in which to plan for the remote learning that takes place when they don't have kids in front of them. And generally speaking, that would also be a day where they'd be able to not only plan, prep, and collaborate, have some professional development, but also it's an opportunity to also to have office hours with students. I said earlier in this presentation that everything here is collectively bargained. This also would need to be collectively bargained. And to be upfront, that process has already started with our association. We are at the beginning of talking about the different models.
Can I ask you a quick question before you go off this page? What does it mean? 4 days in person, remote on Fridays, 5 days remote?
So if one of the models that a lot of people emerged with a lot of people was basically a week in and a week out. 4 days in person is really that week, because that 5th day needs to be used for planning. And then if you add that day for that planning and that preparation to weekend and the time remote, it's quite a distance between when you would see the kids again.
No, I understand now. That's basically giving what one person's view would be of a 2-week cycle.
Could I have yes. Could I have the next slide, please? So I want to pause here before I go any further. I want to make sure people understand that when we started this project, and people can disagree with everything they've heard for a variety of reasons, whether they want to blame medical professionals, the governor, the state, DESE, me, administrators, teachers, whoever you want to blame. In Abington, we began this process with a recommendation and a thought and the concept that we would be coming back 100%, because that's what everybody wants. We tried, and that's all the information that you've been hearing. That's the majority of the information you've been hearing in these presentations. It wasn't to just be negative about this all in-person start and what that would do. It was to give you the specifics about what that looked like. I want to go back to Wendy's opening statement and feel good again. But as I listened to the conditions in which the school community would live with 100% return to school, it's driven the recommendation to this model in terms of what's best. No model that we move forward with is going to be popular with everyone. But this is the one, as of July 29th, is believed by me and the administrative team is the best on the table to date. And that is to begin the school year with a 2-3 split, really. Each class is divided into 2 groups. There's an A group and a B group. The A group attends school in person on Monday and Tuesday, engages in remote learning on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. The B group engages in remote learning on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, and attends in person on Thursday and Friday. Students with complex and significant needs will be prioritized for in-person learning for all services delineated in their IEPs, and may participate in in-person instruction up to and including full-time. There is a difference for some of the students with special needs depending on their challenges. The Wednesdays in this model would be used for not only the planning, collaboration, and prep time and office hours for students, they could also be used for disinfecting between the different A and the B groups of the buildings. And next slide, please. So it provides for 2 days of instruction in a row. A new curriculum would be introduced on those in-person days. The gap between the in-person learning and the experience is 5 days. That's the question that Chris asked. That includes the weekend. Teachers deliver instruction during the days the students are in person. Students apply what they have learned and interact online with materials provided by the teacher during the remote days. Teachers review the work that's been submitted. Complete online or in-person student work is graded as appropriate, and students will engage in remote learning on Wednesdays. And I'm repeating myself there again. Next slide, please. Want to open it up for questions?
I have one or two questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
If we can just go, well, I guess we don't need the slides up. If we can just clarify for everybody out there, when out of all of those days, when cohort A is meeting and cohort B is at home, the teachers will be pretty much only working with cohort A. Cohort B will be doing independent studies. We'll only be connecting with the teachers via email or some other option. Teachers won't be really interacting with that cohort B on those days.
Correct. And you highlighting because they've got kids in front of them that they're teaching in person.
And then will teachers on that Wednesday, will teachers be in the building or at home?
That would depend on the condition in terms of the safety in the building. People being, I think there's a preference with a lot of teachers to be in the building on those days, but that's probably not universal.
Okay.
The feeling about the every other day option for hybrid is that's just too choppy. In, out, in, out. And the feeling about the week long, which really isn't week long, it's more like 4 days, is that the gap, those touch points where you're in person are too long.
Peter, I have a question. I know you spoke a little bit about this before, but can you speak to how the cohorts are going to be organized? Like what makes group A, what makes group B? I know you mentioned alphabetical, but also like consideration of leveling. I know more of the elementary grades are homogeneous, but you know, up at the high school level, like especially like if there's, you know, AP classes or such, which typically have a less amount of kids in those classes, you know, will you be running those classes 2 times if they're just by alphabetical order, or would it be that only be offered like, you know, one certain days, or can you just speak about that?
Yes, and it's an excellent question. We've had some questions from the community about actually even doing it by neighborhood, which would be a great way to do it in terms of people's lives and creating these sort of communities of learning within Abington. The difficulty is that we need to do 2 things. You highlighted one. We need to, the best we can, deliver the complete program of studies we have and satisfy the AP and the French and the students that are taking an instrument that I don't know how we're going to do because they're going to have to do it outside and hopefully the weather's good. But in matching all of those needs and balancing class sizes, it's likely we would have to use an alphabet almost by grade. Like there's no way we're going to be able to say A through M goes here and the other, you know, the other part of the alphabet goes there. We would have to do that almost, I would assume, by grade. And that includes the high school. And then allow families to fill out a form because we want to keep families together in terms of matching the family needs with A or B. And it's a complicated answer, and it doesn't mean that I have the complete answer tonight. But those are the challenges we face with trying to put this together because we want to accommodate those high school program study needs absolutely the best we can because those are students that are graduating and going off to life. So it wouldn't be a split clean for the district by alphabet. It likely, as we've thought about this, we wouldn't be able to do it by side of town the way we used to do kindergarten, as much as it would be great to be able to do it by side of town. Have I made it more complicated?
A little bit.
Peter, I just had a follow-up to that, and I'm sorry that I'm adding to the pile of problems, but I'm just thinking alphabetically could be challenging for families too. And I know it's any way is challenging, but I just want to throw another consideration out there. And I don't know the workaround. I just am putting it out there. I'm thinking about how by neighborhood sounds great, but the reality is that, especially in a small town like Abington, a lot of the connections or the people that families will be relying on to be helping to care for the village on those remote days may not be in their alphabet group. And so that could be just, I know we don't have an answer for that, but I don't know if you've thought of that, or if it's not even worth, like, we just can't think about it because the problems are too many. But I wonder if there's a way to if we go that route, figure out if people have to have their children home 3 days a week and they're not in school, their first thought is going to be who's taking care of the kids those days. And in a lot of cases, I think, Wendy, you and I have touched on this, it'll be people, like, are you home on those days? Could you let my kids work remotely from your house, type of thing, for families that are comfortable in small groups? I don't know.
I think that would go back to that waiver piece. We would have to start with respect for the program of studies and balance, and then find an alphabetical designation almost by grade, and then allow people to request changes, and to the extent possible, honor the swapping from A to B, and hope that we get equal numbers moving back and forth. And the numbers may not be completely equal, but we obviously want to get as close to equal numbers as possible, and include, we've also want to make sure that we have an equal gender ratio,
But there will be a top priority to keep siblings in the same date. So if Michelle is right in the middle of the alphabet and my sister is in a different grade, in fourth grade, I might have been in the A cohort, but my sister in sixth grade in the B cohort, we're going to make sure that families are in the same cohort. So the split, while we'd be looking for pure 50-50, won't necessarily be 50-50. It'll be close to 50-50. And then you add in the waiver piece, and it'll offset it. And students that do come, that may come every day, that may also impact the split numbers.
So,
sorry. Oh, I was gonna say, people might be wondering what students would come every day. So do you wanna talk about who could potentially be coming every day? I don't know if
that would probably be Dr. Robbins.
Hi all. Yeah, so the students who would be coming up to and including each day of the week would be students with what's considered significant and complex disabilities. So they would have been previously identified as a student with disability, i.e. they receive special education, and the extent of their services is considered quite comprehensive. So they'd be in programs using special ed lingo, which mean like partial inclusion, which is that they're spending less than half of their school day in with their other general education students, or they participate in substantially separate programs like our TLC, like the TLC classrooms that we have from grades pre-K to 4. Also, all preschool age students with disabilities will be prioritized for in-person instruction up to and including each day of the week. And also students who are dual identified. So that means, and what that means is students with disabilities who are also English learners, or students with disabilities who are also homeless or in foster care.
Thank you.
Peter, I had a few questions off of the hybrid, so forgive me as I go through it. I think I've asked this one before, but I just want to ask it again. This is more for the group that would be at home during their hybrid session. Has there been consideration for any kind of like live streaming of it or cameras in there for the group that's at home to be able to see the exact same thing that's being taught at the exact same time?
We have thought about that. I think a number of Massachusetts communities have thought about that. And the difficulties with that are not only getting the equipment, because the availability of the equipment isn't there for us. Then in the use of the equipment, both the camera and the microphone quality potentially would be terrible, with a teacher having to be in front of the presentation materials, and students not being able to see or hear, or the other piece is the privacy piece with students in the classroom, and then broadcasting live instruction would be something in terms of privacy for both the students involved, but also the teacher in terms of broadcasting live instruction, and would be challenges.
Okay, yeah, thank you. These next couple, based off the fact that I believe in the last meeting, you had mentioned that if the committee were to, the Abington Public Schools moves forward with either a hybrid or a full in-person session for September, parents would have the option to choose to remote learn their child. They would have the opt-out, if you will, to have their child learn remotely. Is that correct?
Yes, 100%.
If that parent chooses to do that in that situation, would they be receiving instruction or materials from an Abington Public School teacher?
That's a good question. My preference would always be to have an Abington Public School teacher provide that for our students that are remote. That might not be possible or practical, and the reasons for that are we don't know. We have teachers that are medically fragile. They have family members that are medically fragile who won't be coming to school, and they potentially could provide that. But we have a pre-K through 12 curriculum and program of studies, and to know where people would be out, that they would be able to cover those different areas in terms of their fields. And we'd be able to manage that while managing our own hybrid or our own in-person. I don't know that would be the best way to move forward for Abington, or any system the size of Abington, to be quite honest with you. Perhaps the state is also looking at different independent modules that are completely independent, where students might have that as a better option, and we would purchase seats in that for the number of students who decide that if we're either full in person or hybrid, that they're not coming because to meet their needs, they would have that option.
Okay, and just that's how I understood it from the way it was presented. But I've heard a lot of talk of people just saying I can opt my child and thinking that they would just become part of getting that curriculum. And I want to make sure that it's known that opting your own child into the remote learning, if the public school system does not necessarily mean you will have that ability to interact with the Abington teacher. So I just want to make that clear. The last one I had has to do with the opt-out. And I know it's all hypothetical right now, but if the district decided to go hybrid and you had a number of parents decide to opt their child for remote, does the flexibility allow for us as a committee or you as a superintendent to say now the numbers show we could go full in person and almost have the same capacity as a hybrid?
I think that we need to be ready to shift gears to any model as best we can. And then I think that's the best way to answer that question. The only thing that you raised in my mind that I want to make people aware of is that, let's say we're in one model for a period of time, it will be difficult for students who have decided to be remote to hop in and hop out.
Yeah,
I guess you'll always be able to hop out.
Yeah.
But there may be natural break points to hop back in.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think I was more thinking of you have to submit by August 10th what the Abington Public Schools are going to do. And let's just say it's hybrid. And then between August 10th and September 2nd, you get an influx of requests to opt to remote, where it becomes where if we go in person, we have the same amount of kids as we would have, or roughly, in a hybrid. Could we flip on a dime and say September 2nd is now going to be full in person for all those that have still chosen to come to school?
I don't know if anything's going to be on a dime, but it'll be as fast as we can.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's what I think you know what I meant with it. So,
if I can, just to go back, Chris, to your first question, if I'm understanding it correctly, when you were asking about for the students who are in the other cohort who are at home, about getting kind of a live stream for what's going on in the class, I'm understanding that it would just be the same information that was being taught just the second time to cohort B. So they wouldn't be getting anything new. It would just be an exact repeat of what was taught to the first cohort. So it wouldn't it wouldn't be necessary because it wouldn't be anything new.
well, Danielle, in my situation, it would be a new lesson every day. And whether you're in the building or in person, you'd be learning the same lesson on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So when you go in on Thursday, even if you've been home on Monday, Tuesday, you already learned that at home.
So I think Chris was saying was if we went full in person,
No,
and
so
then
if
people
you're-
chose
if we're-
remote,
No, so
they could watch the classes online.
what Danielle's referring to is when I mentioned the streaming, correct, Danielle?
Yep.
Right. So cohort A is in the building on Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah.
And cohort B is at home.
Yeah.
So then you said if cohort A comes home and wants to stream, they're going to get the same thing because they already learned it on Monday and Tuesday. In my situation, that wouldn't, because they would have taught it to everybody on Monday and Tuesday.
With half the
And live
class,
streaming.
with half the
Right.
class in person and half live streaming.
Correct. And then you continue the
Yeah.
same thing, just different. So you'd continue the lesson on Thursday and Friday. It would just be a different group of people in the building at that point, but all getting the same lesson at the same time because they'd be watching it for the 6 hours virtually. But I understand why Peter said that that's not something that's feasible.
Yeah, so just to clarify, that's not what's happening here. So what I understand that would be happening is let's put myself in the teacher role. So I'm preparing for the cohort A that's going to show up in front of me on Monday and Tuesday. I'm going to teach them in person some things. On Wednesday, when everybody's remote, I may check in with all. I might choose to hold a class meeting with A and B, who are potentially all one. They're all mine. They're all part of a classroom. On Thursday and I'll also be prepping on Wednesday for what the students who were not in school on Monday and Tuesday were doing at home while they were home on Monday and Tuesday. The B cohort would have been home. So let's just use people. Like James, you were in A and you got the live instruction. I had to think forward thinking to Peter, was home on Monday, Tuesday. What was he doing? And I need to hope that there's a connection so that when I see Peter's group on Thursday, Friday, that group doesn't feel lost. But when you leave me, James, for Thursday, Friday, you can continue with learning that you got. So by the end of a complete week, both cohorts, A and B, will have had some commonality of experience. Is that understanding accurate? Sort of.
You're a good teacher.
Okay, just checking. I want to make sure I understand it right, because the streaming would be ideal, right? So Monday and Tuesday I'm teaching, except that it's not ideal for people's privacy. It's not ideal because in real life, we don't need the way that every child behaves and learns needs to be broadcast into every home. So there's an issue with that. But from a teaching and learning standpoint, if we didn't consider any other factors, it would be so nice to just stream the teacher home so that it's exactly matched, that James and Peter get the exact same experience, one in front of me and one from their house. But we don't have that option. Okay.
Can I say something? Because I had brought that up to Peter a couple of weeks ago, and I really like the option as well. And I definitely think that we should look into it more. I think that there's a way around this. I think that if we do go back to school, then there could be kids that are immune compromised that might not feel comfortable about coming back to school. And I think that we should be able to give them the same experience, the best that we can. And I mean, I'm looking at your whiteboard right now, Peter, and I can see that you have a paper on the back of it and or on it, and there's words written. I think that if you had, you know, a colorful marker, I would be able to see everything that you have written. And, you know, there's mute, there's raising the hand, there's different things that, you know, a child will be able to use. So you can't hear what's going on in their home. I just would really like to look further into this option. If we go full in person, or even, you know, maybe it would even help those kids that if we go hybrid, that they're having a little bit of trouble. Now they can go on and say, it's math time. Maybe I can go and learn a little bit more, you know, or try to comprehend this a little bit more.
So just, we can always look into anything more, but I can't give people hope that that can delay decision-making in terms of things we need to move forward. Another issue is the availability of the stream in terms of the connectivity. Not only do we have issues with that many live streams coming out of a building, we also have that same issue with in people's homes with the receiving that live stream. That would be an equity issue. So I've tried to answer the question.
But I think that we need to test this out. We haven't even tested it, to be fair. Do you know what I mean? I feel like that we have to at least give it a test to see if it will work.
I guess I hear you, Wendy, and I guess I respectfully just disagree, only because I'm thinking of it feels disrespectful to educators. I always, and Peter will attest to this, like I always say to him, if there's a teacher that works in the Abington Public Schools, they should always teach in a way that the parents could be walking in the hallway. Would you say that if the parents were outside the door? And that's the way that I teach, is that I would say what I'm saying to children as if their parent or the superintendent, my boss, is there. That being said, if you relate that to parenting, you don't want someone filming you in your home, parenting your children. We have moments that like we are frustrated or you're not our best self. And when that happens in your home, you're not judged on the scale that I feel like it feels like Big Brother to a certain extent, that people are watching your every move. And it's not just the child watching, it's anybody who's in the child's living room is watching. And I don't know if that feels, I guess I'm feeling uncomfortable with that in terms of an educator's perspective on that.
And in terms of best practice, I know you can see what's behind me, and maybe I should put something more interesting up behind me for future meetings, but it's not best teaching practice in terms of delivering education. I mean, and none of this
is best teaching practice, is that?
Right. But it's
do what we gotta do.
I don't, it'd be difficult to find an educator that thinks that type of instruction with the available technology would be effective.
Again, I didn't say for us to completely do this, but any of those children that are immune compromised or have difficulties, I think that we should look into it for them. I know that this happens, and I've said it to you before, for kids that have had medical issues and have had to been out of school for a long period of time. I know I've seen it on the news and TV, so it can happen. I just want to say that I think that we should test it out, that we shouldn't just ignore this piece.
Oh, believe me, it hasn't been ignored, Wendy. I can tell you I've spent a lot of time on this question.
Another question I have is, you had mentioned break points where you could go back to school. Would that be by the term, like, you know, 1 and then term 2, or would that be, you know, after 2 weeks? What do you think break points are? What does that entail? Like, and how long does it take to go from, okay, you know, is it just Friday and then Monday you're back? You know, how does that work?
Potentially, it would make sense to me if we could find natural breaks like the end of a marking period to move people, but I'm not sure about that answer, because we also, you know, we're public schools, and you don't want to keep kids out of their public school if they want to be in the building. So,
right.
TBD.
So I like that answer. So question for you, it's on one of the slides, is there an easy way to get back to the slides?
Yep, if you tell me which side.
It's actually to the survey from Sherry, and I guess it would be the first page of the survey. I just wanted from the
Slide number 7, Rich, I believe.
The comparison of last survey to this survey for the parent answers. And I'm not a math girl, so I might need help. So 807 people took the survey, and then 826 people took the first survey. So correct? And that went from 60% to 40%. And then the hybrid. Okay, so I just wanted to see these numbers again, basically, and see how many parents and staff took the surveys. And it's pretty similar. Thank you. Can I ask one more thing, actually? Because you brought this up before about maybe having neighborhoods. And so I was just a thought going out there that maybe we could flex the bus, where if we did the timing for a couple of schools a little closer or maybe a little further apart. I don't know how it worked, just a thought that I came up with, but can't we put families on the same bus? So if I have 4 kids and 2 are at Beaverbrook and 2 are at, Woodsdale, could we have the buses go in neighborhoods and pick up? Because if you're in the same neighborhood, you're probably playing with those kids. You know what I mean? So maybe they are already a little immune to their friends. Was throwing that out there as maybe a thought or a possibility down the line.
So we really can't, they're already going into neighborhoods by school, by grade level.
Right.
And are you meaning put groups of kids that are neighbors in closer proximity on buses?
Yeah, so I'm just saying, like, maybe, my kid doesn't take the bus, so I could be just totally wrong here. But yeah, if you're in the same neighborhood, then you're playing with the same kids or you know what I mean? So like what if we put some kids on, like, just.
So you could have more than 23 students on a bus? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. No. Sorry. What families choose to do in their neighborhood is what families choose to do, but we have to follow the safety guidelines.
Right. Okay. I got you.
Sorry.
I have a question. So back to the learning. So you said, like, when cohort A is in the building, they're going to be having new learning for those 2 days. Then the next 3 days, there's no new learning. Is it just work based on that? So based on what they just learned the first 2 days. So does that mean the kids are only learning something new on Monday and Tuesday? So are we learning less throughout the school year because you only have 2 days of new learning?
So those topics and things are introduced in person generally, and then when they're not, then they're working on those materials online.
Okay. So in a regular school week, you might be learning new things every day, but now we're only allowed to learn new things on 2 days, because during those remote days, there won't be any like pre-recorded lessons or other things. It's just work that's maybe assigned on Canvas. Am I understanding that correctly?
There could be other things that stretch you on those other days, but it wouldn't be the same in-person experience.
Okay, oh, go ahead, Jackie.
Sorry, Lisa. I don't know if this helps you, but I think the piece we're not considering here is the Wednesday. Like, I can picture the comments of, like, well, what are teachers doing on Wednesday? They're just, the kids are home and they're just, what are they doing? And what they're doing, in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm making the connection between my A and B cohort, maybe in a live format, like, hey, everyone, hey, all 24 of you, I haven't seen you together, here you are, Brady Bunch view. Listen, there are some videos you're going to find in Canvas that I've that on Wednesdays when I'm not with either cohort, A or B in person, I'm not home, either I'm home or I'm in the school building pre-recording, if that's negotiated and agreed upon by our teachers union, that they would be creating resources and maybe that asynchronous learning experience, so that at least the learning could still somewhat continue on the days you're not with a teacher, hypothetically, but instead of it being live person to person, it would be a pre-recorded instruction. I don't know, am I thinking about that wrong? But that's what I was thinking.
Okay, so let me ask, so cohort A, they'll start learning in the building and then they're going to remote. So what about cohort B, what are they going to do for the first 2 days because they haven't learned anything yet? They're just going to be watch things or do assignments in preparation because they haven't been taught it yet?
Yeah, I also see principals fidgeting, jumping, wanting to say something, so.
The week doesn't necessarily go Monday through Friday either. So you're in person Thursday and Friday. Like, you can look at the week either Monday through Friday or Thursday through Wednesday.
Right, okay. That's all right, so that makes sense. So then your week will just, depending on your cohort, your week will just be different days.
Yeah,
The in-person versus the remote. I'll let the principal, yeah.
Right.
So the experience you were talking about for the Monday, Tuesday cohort, and then they're taking the time to interact on Canvas and apply, is happening. That same process is happening. It's just happening on Thursday and Friday. So their first shot at the content happens on Thursday and Friday, and they take Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday to be applying their knowledge and interacting on Canvas, taking assessments, etc. It does sort of require you to break from the Monday through Friday, week in and week out.
It also starts off messy. Like, the beginning's not neat, but once you are in the groove, the kids who are not in school on Monday, Tuesday would have already heard on Thursday and Friday when they're with their teacher what their job is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So, like, it's this constant cycle of, I see you, you've talked to me in person, I kind of go off and know my job and my role. The teacher's there midweek virtually to connect the dots. I mean, this is like, I just want people to understand, if you're not following this, this is a major orchestration on the part of the educators. So that is why that Wednesday, I worry that that day off will look like a day that teachers are not with students. And I think that without that day, the rest of it's not possible. Like, we're not going to keep equity across all the experiences for both cohort A and cohort B.
If we start September 16th, then that is a Wednesday. So that would be a day that we would be all together. And then it would nicely kind of roll into, you see, cohort A or B, whatever you want to call it. And so it would work out starting on that Wednesday, September 16th.
Mm-hmm.
It would, and we would, the next question is going to be, what if we have a long weekend? And we don't have many in that start of the school year, but we'd have to adjust and balance as we can with those.
I just want, Danielle, did you suggest that on that Wednesday we'd bring everybody in, or what? Oh, okay.
That Wednesday would be that middle of the week day that you would have the time to meet with both cohorts.
Thank you.
And explain to them how it works.
Yes, thank you.
And honestly, it may take more than just Wednesday to do that. It's going to take some time to adjust, no matter how we get back. Am I giving everybody feedback? Should I mute? No.
Is Marty still with us? Marty Golightly.
I sure am.
Hi, Marty.
Hi.
So our last meeting, I had asked you a couple of questions, and I haven't heard back, so I didn't know if you had been able to come up with any of the answers.
The answer to the how many are young question.
Yes.
It's a very difficult question to answer, and I'm still working on it. I'm being
Okay.
honest. And the problem is the system we use to track is kind of counterintuitive and difficult to manage. So pending.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
For anyone that was wondering, actually who wasn't with us at the last meeting, I did ask Marty how many children have contracted COVID. And I think there was just some age brackets that I had asked you about. So that's it.
And I think I have to say this here, I'm sorry, and Wendy, you know I love you, and I think that we're gonna have differences of opinions as a committee, but it like strikes a nerve when we ask about the data for students, like I'm in full agreement of the science that children appear to not be spreading the virus. I'll go with that science. The thing that we don't say when we ask this, when we talk about that science is, and I think I said this the last meeting, is who do we think is with the children when we put them back in the schools? And so the issue becomes that the children aren't spreading it to children, and maybe and hopefully the children aren't spreading it to adults, but adults are spreading it to adults. And so when we put, say, in the Abington Middle and High School together, we're putting a lot of adults back indoors in a way that we haven't done without, and I guess I just don't know for sure. I feel so unsettled by the idea that when we say kids aren't sharing it with kids, are we basing that because we've put kids back indoors and we feel certain about that? Or are we saying that because when this all started, we took kids out of these spaces? Like how many kids are gathering in large numbers that equate to school sizes? Do we have any data on that? And I really wish we would, so we could make better decisions. And Marty, I don't know if you know that answer. Like, is there any data in the hundreds of kids inside?
Well, there haven't been any of those gatherings. We're still limited. Our gathering size limited is in Massachusetts, still limited to 25, 8 per 1,000 square foot, to a maximum of 25 indoors. The gatherings that have been outdoors, I really don't know the answer to that question, other than there's been a few people that are in quarantine because of a contact with the positive cases who are under the age of 18, school-age children. But I honestly don't know. And I think we won't know until we get kids back into school.
And I'm not saying I'm unwilling to try that. I'm just thinking about how important, like we just talked a minute ago about that orchestration piece, that even to pull off the hybrid model, we need an adult, a qualified teacher, to be able to connect the dots between cohort A and cohort B. If that teacher goes down, meaning just that she or he gets sick and is unable, just let's pretend they test positive, even on a mild case, a normal school year, I can't tell you how many times as the reading teacher, I don't get to act as a reading teacher and I have to go be a grade 3 classroom teacher because we can't get a substitute to come in and cover the class. So principals are desperate and they come and say, I'm sorry, Jackie, like don't take reading groups today, but can you go be the 3rd grade teacher? Because we don't have any substitutes. So if I guess I'm wondering, like when we bring people back, if the teachers or the adults that are responsible for the children go down, because science tells us that they do become sick and they, being in close contact with each other, could potentially share, even with a mask on. I hope not. I hope I'm wrong. But do we have a plan for how do we, 24 kids are going to show up, or let's pretend hybrid, 12 kids show up, no matter what. Cohort A is here on Monday and Tuesday. If we don't have the staff, and I know the principals are here, like, have you guys as an admin team thought through what do you do? Who do you get to stand in?
That's going to be a problem because all of the districts in Massachusetts are going to be struggling for people to stand in.
Okay, so are there any other questions from the committee or any staff, anyone? Peter, is there anything else? Like, should I move on to the parent questions or?
Whatever is the pleasure of the committee, however you want to handle the questions.
Okay, is that all right, everyone?
Yes.
Because there's a lot, and if you find, because I'm just reading them out, I have gone through and read some of them, and I know, the ones that I've already answered, but I haven't gotten through all of it. So if you know that we answered it, just answer it, or you can give a brief statement if you want.
And I think you can always highlight this with, if we miss something tonight, we're not going anywhere.
Right.
And the phones work, the email works. This will be the second presentation that people can watch. So there are, if people want the answer, there are lots of questions you can't answer, but we're here.
Excellent. And I just want to clarify something too, that one of the parents had asked why we didn't have parents coming on and using the chat function to ask questions. And the reason is because anything that is stated in the chat could potentially get out to the public, and somebody could swear or talk badly about somebody or who knows what. So we're just doing it this way, that all questions just come to me to make it all easier. So
one of the stories that's happened, happened, especially as we started this Zoom meeting trend, was the security of Zoom isn't all that great. People could hijack the meeting and publish whatever they want during a meeting. I've seen that in other communities.
So I am going to start with the parent questions. And here we go. Could Mr. Schaefer please discuss how remote learning is being addressed today? Do you have a group of educators working to improve upon the experience in the spring? And if so, what does that look like? How will the process of the system change at all? While I understand fully the focus today is on what it takes to open schools, how is remote learning being addressed right now?
We have been talking. It was a group of teachers and administrators that met just at the close of school year while it was fresh in everybody's minds in terms of what improvements we want to make. And it is a part of the collective bargaining process that we're in right now with teachers and administration and members of the school committee. And I can generalize it for you to give you a clear and quick answer. It's really about making sure if we go to remote learning and when, depending on the trajectory of the virus, that there's grading and there's really greater accountability for everyone, for students and teachers and parents and families and administration, and more of an ability to track what's going on with the remote experience. And if I've missed anything, we've got principals here who feel free to jump in.
I can say that at the elementary level, subject to negotiations, we're working as a team of administrators and teachers in the school committee to ensure that remote learning, if we have to do that, is more robust by having it more structured, by having more contact in smaller groups with students on a daily basis for instruction, so that we can ensure that even though we're remote, we're able to deliver new content in a way that is differentiated for students.
I would add to that, we don't have a choice. Like Abington doesn't have a choice. The state doesn't have a choice. So the spring, was considered across the state sort of crisis remote learning. Like I can tell you personally, I was teaching Thursday in a classroom as my colleague was telling me that tweets were coming in that the marathon had been canceled and the NHL had been canceled. And I was like, is this real? And I left without a single curriculum material. And the very next day, school shut down and I couldn't get any materials until June when we were allowed back in the building. So anything I produced or provided for students that's what I mean when I say crisis learning. The state, when I say we don't have a choice, the state has since issued guidance and guidelines, not just for what we have to do if we bring them back in person or hybrid, but what we have to do if we choose to be remote. And those guidelines say that there are mandatory things that a district must do, like take attendance, like grade, like have a certain number of hours of instruction that have to happen. So when we compare what we were looking at in terms of remote learning in the spring and try to think about what could remote learning be like, or what does it need to look like for this coming school year, to me, those are two different things, completely different experiences. I don't know how any Abington Public School people feel about that, or if I'm misrepresenting that information, but chime in if you.
No, I think the collection of what we've all said is spot on, and that obviously no matter what we do, until there's a shot and we can have people in person 100%, it's not going to be what everybody wants. It'll be improved and better, all three. But
one thing I can add at the high school, unrelated, Ms. Abrams, to your comment, which I agree, I remember that Thursday as well, is the high school is contemplating having a schedule for remote learning that would match a schedule for hybrid learning, so that if students are in a routine of checking into their English class at 8 a.m. every day, if we did get that all of a sudden we are remote students, we would hope that students be able to stay in a routine of having that same class every day, just so there's some familiarity with that schedule and routine.
one of the things we're looking at that would help that is if the learning management system we have has a template that's the same for all educators to hang their materials on, so that families and parents would be able to see exactly, and students would be able to see consistently, here are the assignments, here are the additional resources, here's where I turn my work in, and that standard across and consistency across all subjects and grade levels would be helpful, I think, for everyone. In terms of scheduling also, because you would know better when and where things are consistently.
Wendy, can I just follow up on something that came out through that conversation?
Yes.
Dr. Basta, I just wanted to ask, and maybe you can't answer this in the moment, but particularly in your building, we have K through 2 students. How do you anticipate, let alone them being able to access the material? I mean, a lot of these kids don't even know how to turn on a computer yet. To be able to get to those things, and maybe it's something you can't get to in the moment right now. Those are things that are being worked on now. But I don't know if you could share anything in terms of how that could work, because I feel in your building that the online piece of it, the remote piece of it, would be most difficult than any of the other grades.
You're not wrong, Chris. The age of the students has a great impact on their ability to access the technology that we would be forced to use in a remote environment. And it's true for the preschool and
that's true.
as well. And I can tell you, like Peter has said many times tonight and other nights, we're not alone with that struggle. And there are no easy answers other than when we are able to finally get kids onto devices, and that's probably for our youngest learners with support from either an older sibling or a caregiver, there would be lots of visual, there would be lots of modeling, there would be lots of, anytime we can use any of the strategies that we use in the classroom, such as singing songs as a way to get students familiar with sounds, right? We can, it's different obviously, but we'll still be trying those kinds of strategies. It is very challenging, and as Peter said earlier also, none of these are good options, and school is going to be no matter what this year.
Yep, I agree there.
Bring up one of the biggest challenges for our youngest learners.
Do you anticipate your school focusing more on individual classroom like instruction? I know last year it was more grade level based. All of the first grade kind of access the same materials. Is that kind of where you're leaning again, or is it different?
So again, subject to negotiations and more planning, our vision at both elementary schools really is that, you know, teachers will plan together when they can, but an individual teacher would be responsible for the synchronous instruction, modeling, and guided practice with small groups of kids, and then the independent practice and the assessment and the additional learning activities that are related to the initial instruction, that can be planned with a divide and conquer approach. So a grade level work on those independent asynchronous activities together. And we also, that came up earlier, during asynchronous work, we're also looking at the idea of having our paraprofessionals and our tutors and other staff members available for students if we were in the hybrid model, just jumping back to that. You know, while classroom teachers are working with the kids in front of them and other kids are working remotely, we are trying to connect paraprofessionals, tutors, specialists in the building with those so that they have some support.
I love that idea. That's great. Thank you.
I just want to point out, Kevin, if you can hear us, that someone just sent me a picture of their blank screen that I don't know if it's Comcast or Verizon or maybe it's their TV, that there are television issues, that it is blank on for anyone watching at home on cable. So that first question I asked, there was actually a second question associated with it, and it's more personal. So if you recognize this, if you're the parent, you recognize this question, just so you know, I'm not going to ask it. I'm going to forward it to Peter to answer it. So next question. I'm wondering specifically about 7th grade students who choose the full remote option, who are scheduled to be in advanced math. Will students who choose full remote still be able to take this course? Is this? That's it.
I want to give Matt a chance to answer if he wants to. I think it's that's this online package that we potentially are going to purchase from the state. We would hope would have the ability to be multidimensional enough to handle a wide variety of learners. I would only be able to answer that best when I see what it is. They haven't secured a contract yet, so there's nothing for us to look at yet. Certainly if Abington provides it with Abington teachers, yes, but again, that's TBD.
I think, Peter, I would just echo those sentiments. We are not sure about whatever package that the state might provide. What I can tell you is that in all of our planning for all the different scenarios that we're planning for, we're working to preserve our program of studies, including that course for those students that we can.
Okay. So one is just comments instead of questions. Why are the teachers and staff underestimating kids' resilience and ability to adapt to change? Based on the survey, it feels as if faculty are the ones that don't want to change and adapt. I can't fathom, as someone on the front lines, that I would ever say no to I can't fathom, as someone on the front lines, that I would ever say no to coming and doing my job because of fear and change. We frontliners have adapted and worked to the best of our ability, and we are surviving and rocking it. It just feels as if faculty want to do what is best for them in their fears. And some people need to stop looking through the educators' lenses. It's about the kids and what to do when what is best for kids. So,
I don't know if you're looking for a response to comments tonight. I think we've covered actually both of that during our meeting. And I don't know that I could recreate how well we covered all of that during our meeting already.
Just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know. I was just going down the line. Has the district considered having students go half days? The thought is this would eliminate all the recess lunch issues and they would be spending time in masks.
We have, and part of the problem with the half day is you heard about the staggered entrance and dismissal, because if a half day is 3.5 hours and you have 45 minutes or more on each end, that's an hour and a half minus away from that 3.5. That would be a 2 or less hour day for kids after we have spent an hour and a half on transition.
Okay. I'm a stay-at-home mom with a background in early childhood development. My son is supposed to start kindergarten this fall. Would the committee recommend I homeschool or 100% virtual school rather than have him attend in person, even if hybrid? If families are able to keep their children home, would it be better to keep them home to reduce the size of an in-person class?
That may be a question that person wants to call the Beaverbrook Elementary School, because it's, I think, central to that family, and talk to our expert administrators, Chris Basta and Julie Thompson.
Perfect. Okay. Not gonna have.
Can I just also, Wendy, can I just also, just for a second, talk about the difference between homeschooling and
great.
And remote learning? So if a family chooses, so there's right now, two options. A family can choose to keep their child home and have a remote experience, and that is provided either by the Abington Public Schools or an outside provider. But the content is provided for the family. Homeschooling is when a family chooses to instruct their children with content that they provide. So materials that they provide. So I just wanted to make that distinction between remote and homeschooling.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So if a family chooses full remote, but we have adopted a hybrid model, it shouldn't be assumed, the way I understand it, that someone who has chosen full remote is part of a classroom that was described earlier, like AB cohort. You're part of that. You're not really part of that. You're in your own experience.
Correct.
And that experience may be taught by a teacher from Abington, or that experience may be taught from a program that we purchase a seat in for the child that's chosen the remote path.
Yes, correct.
Are teachers going to be enforcing mask policy while on school grounds? What will that look like?
We are going to do everything we can to enforce the mask policy. There are certain exceptions that are made for people with different conditions. One of the things we're going to need to get to once we know what direction we're going in is what policies are we going to put in place with regard to this.
Will there be staff, parent, student education prior to school starting regarding mask hygiene, such as how to wear one, keeping nose and mouth covered, not wearing under your chin, not touching, changing when soiled, sneezing, safe removal, etc.? How would that information be accessible to everyone?
Any in-person program that we provide will include not only at startup professional development for our staff, but education for our students, and frequent reminders and reinforcement of not only how to wear PPE, but also basic hygiene practices, stay home when sick, wash your hands, the whole list that unfortunately we all could recite in our sleep.
Will there be outside monitoring inspection to ensure proper air quality and sanitation guidelines? Are disposable masks being used more than once?
we will follow every inspection requirement that we have to follow. I couldn't tell you what those might be today. And part of the professional development, part of the education is about how to use masks and not reusing masks after the designated time period.
What measures will be taken if a staff member or family with children in the school going on vacation or being in contact with someone who might have been exposed? What protocols are in place for that, and how will that be monitored?
So we've been given protocols around that. Felicia or Marty, I think Felicia handled that part of the presentation last time.
So there's strict policy. Well, there's protocols that have been put in place by DESE that we would follow around exposures. And in terms of vacations and quarantining, there's a requirement in the state that you have to quarantine if you come back from other states. And I think, and that Marty can maybe be able to speak to this differently, but there is a piece of this that's self-monitoring, and there's a piece of self-monitoring around if you have any of the symptoms that you don't come to school. And so in terms of if you leave the state for some reason into a state that you return to Massachusetts and have to quarantine, you need to quarantine.
And people would be responsible to do that themselves.
Sorry. And there are different guidelines for both a positive test and a close contact with a positive test. And that was all in the guidance that was sent to at the last meeting and was referenced earlier. And it kind of depends on the situation. And yes, it is, it's integrity, staying home when you're asked to do so. It's difficult to enforce and monitor.
And something that we'll continue to do is that whenever these occurrences come up, poor Marty, I've called him not 24 hours, but pretty close to 24 hours, even with the low rate that we've had in Abington.
What will parent pickup look like? Will it be at the same location, back playground, in a large congregation? I'm assuming they're talking about Beaver Brook. Would social distancing for parents be monitored or enforced? So
we're going to continue to tell the parents and encourage the parents about what the rules are. But if parents are on the property and they're not wearing masks, I'm not a police officer, and neither are our adults in the Abington Public Schools. I mean, we'll handle that as best we can in terms of managing the adults. We covered the staggered entrance and dismissal to school. There would be that we would slow that whole thing down, and there would be as many points of pickup and release as possible. But we have hundreds of students in each building.
And can I just add on to that? If it's a specific question to Beaverbrook, because the playground being in the back comment, in years past, yes, the gates would be closed and parents would park and come and wait for their kids. That wouldn't be happening this year. So our pickup at Beaverbrook, our dismissal procedure for pickup would look more like our drop-off procedure in the morning. Parents would have to drive through their kids, so parents wouldn't be getting out of their cars.
With the drop-off and pickup in buses, will this take away from instruction time, and how will that time be made up?
We answered
Won't be
that,
made up.
right?
Yeah, we can't make that.
Yeah. Have the recent negotiations with teachers' unions in the state impacted the guidance related to districts on an individual basis? Would a potential teacher strike impact online learning for students? If so, how would that instruction time be made up?
Yeah, that's really beyond what we'd be able to answer you this evening.
Okay. What will school look like for those in AEEP, which is the early elementary preschool. Will mask wearing be encouraged even though it is not mandatory? How will social distancing be achieved in that environment? How will parent pickup and drop off be organized?
I think we have Laura here.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, mask wearing will be encouraged, and that might sound frightening, but there's many kids that have been in the summer program and they're actually handling mask wearing very well. I think the parents might be having more difficulty with the idea than the kids are in many cases. In terms of,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you just tell us how long the summer program is?
The summer program, James, that was a 4-week program.
How long are the students in per day?
2 hours.
And does that match how long they're in for preschool? I don't know the hours of preschool.
Well, before COVID, it was a 2.5-hour day with a morning session and a PM session. Accounting for extensions in drop-off and pickup, it might need to be shortened. Realistically, it probably will need to be shorter than that. And then in terms of what the day is going to look like, we're going to try to follow what we've done all along as best that we possibly can. We're going to be working with kids, sitting in the cube chairs, using mats on the floors and so forth to try to be as interactive as we possibly can, but maintaining that 3-foot distance because that is a requirement for us.
We've also worked on arrival and dismissal. Did you want to address that?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll continue to have the special education students that arrive on the van enter and be dismissed through the door that they have been, which is to the side. Instead of having parents come over and enter the lobby, bring their kids in and wait in masses there is a door adjacent to that which opens up into the high school in like a vestibule with a stairwell. We'll be accessing that. And then we'll be having parents bring their children toward that door, waiting within 6-foot distances. We are talking the reality of facing the elements. There's going to be days when it's rainy and cold and so forth, but the kids will be enter in through that vestibule and be walked down to their classes one by one.
Okay. The learning spaces slides state that the guidelines advise removal of all non-essential furniture. It does not differentiate younger children education areas, including the kindergarten classrooms. The new guidelines from July 22nd state that center stations may remain in kindergarten classrooms and that small cohorts may use these stations for collaborative learning, and that the center rotation activities would be brought to children. Does Abington plan to move forward with center-based activities to foster educational opportunities for collaborative learning and for the important subjects used to develop skills at these stations?
I think Chris or Julie would be best answering that.
Sure. To the extent that we can, while we're following the guidance for maintaining the sanitary and hygienic conditions of the materials. So if a station is being used by 3 kids who are spaced out 3 feet apart, and the teacher or a paraprofessional is working with them, the materials on the table need to be disinfected before another group uses that same station. And that, is also in the guidance. So that is our plan, but there are certain parts of a kindergarten classroom where that wouldn't necessarily be feasible. So we would be working with individual teachers to figure out, well, what can we use and what can't we use? For example, there are parts of a imaginative dramatic play station, like a kitchen set, that it just doesn't seem feasible to be able to make that work with the amount of times we would have to clean the pots and pans and the plastic food items. So yes, to the extent possible, following the guidance to keep these stations disinfected, we would be trying to do that.
Suffice it to say, though, it would be substantially different and less than what people imagine kindergarten was. Or remember.
With a more concrete example, like let's look at blocks. I think one of the kindergarten, and I could be wrong, but when one of my children were in kindergarten, there was a center that involved building blocks to create like communities. So you would share the blocks and build, I don't know, the hospital and the police station or something to that extent. That center could still be brought to a group of children. In other words, the blocks that the Abington Public School owns and uses could be brought over to an area where children are 3 feet apart. The blocks just can't be shared. So a teacher would have to distribute what used to be collaborative learning materials where they work together in teams to build the communities. They would each receive some of the blocks and build like a structure, let's say, and talk from 3 feet apart on their area about their structure. So when you say it looks different, it's not that the centers aren't possible, it's just they're not. I think the guidelines are a little misleading. I'm a K-2, my job is K-2 literacy. So I plan and work today. I had 45 teachers in a training that we talked about ways to make sure we could try to meet those types of activities. And it's very, I'll be honest, it's very challenging. It's not, there's some of that is funding. Can we buy more blocks so that, you know, and yes to some things, but it just takes time, and we're working those details out, I'm sure, in Abington.
Then depending on the size of the blocks, they would all need to be cleaned that evening. So if we're talking about little blocks, that becomes difficult. If we're talking about bigger blocks, that's easier.
Thank you. Will students be allowed to request mask breaks throughout the school day? 2 mask breaks per day does not seem sufficient for small children.
I would assume there's going to be kiddos that need more than 2, and we would have to somehow accommodate them as best we can, as often as we can.
I am confused why children in school cannot take their masks off outside at recess unless they are 6 feet apart. There are currently indoor basketball, hockey, gymnastics practices, outdoor soccer, lacrosse, etc. occurring. These activities are allowed to occur and children are certainly within 6 feet of distance from each other. Why is this different than standards for our children outside at school?
So all the activities we're seeing outside by different organizations, some are following the rules and some are not following the rules. And all I can say is we're following the rules for indoor for public schools that we've been given.
And outdoor for public, yeah.
And outdoor for public schools.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you may, you know, there were a bunch of people on a boat, or there were a bunch of people at the beach, you know, they're not following the rules. There are different, anything we're involved in, we're following the rules we've been given, and that's why you're seeing the differences. It's a great question.
Okay, given, has there been a breakdown of the parent feedback by grade level? If so, has any consideration been given to bringing the younger grades back, as they would benefit more from in-person learning since they are still building their foundational skills and are less capable of participating in online learning? Further, numerous studies have shown that this population is statistically less likely to spread COVID. This would also allow the older students who are more capable of independent learning to work in the remote format.
So it has been something that's been talked about. We have gotten input on that. I've gotten the sense that Abington wanted to be consistent with what it was doing with its grade levels.
Can I ask you how you came to that consensus?
Just these conversations.
Okay. I mean, I would be flexible. I was just something.
I know that certain members of our committee have made it clear that they feel that we should have consistency. I know there are families that have said that to us in terms of what their families are doing. So, and I know there are differing opinions on that. I don't have a survey that, you know, says that, but
right.
I don't know if other members that you know want to comment on that. That's what I've, you know, so I want everybody to understand there are 5 school committee members here, and I try as best I can to hear a voice from 5 different members. But I've got 5 different members that I'm trying to work with here who are responsible for a difficult decision in Massachusetts.
I think I prefer unison throughout the district. I think I'd be amicable to discussing changing it up if it was something that became the best option. I think it goes back to my comment I made to Dr. Basta earlier about how could the children that attend his school be expected to learn like remote learning, whereas high school has its own different issues with it, but they can physically, most of them can physically access the material on their own. That would be my only thing, but I know with the high school being remote has its own issues with it as well.
Okay. Another consideration would be how many families are currently continuing with social distancing. If people are with one another in the community already, such as in sports, play dates, etc., why are we putting so much emphasis on staying out of school? Have you considered a parent survey on this topic?
We don't have a choice. We've been given guidelines that are actually mandates that have been promulgated from, it's DESE, but it's also DESE took them from the American Academy of Pediatrics, through the governor's office, through MGH, through a variety of sources, and you can look at those sources in the materials. I'm going to repeat, as much as people may make individual choices and they have individual freedoms around what they might do, we can't, and each of us as individuals may make choices. When we're dealing with everybody else's kids, we can't decide what rules we're going to follow from the medical experts and what rules we're not going to follow from the medical experts. Safety is the first tenet, and we have to follow those rules that we're given. So doing a survey wouldn't be helpful for that. How many people don't want to follow the rules? Well, 100 out of 100, but we have to.
I've heard of some schools setting up outdoor areas such as big tents to have class under. Is this an option for our town?
I'm not aware of big tents. I know big tents are hard to get. We're using every space we have. I don't know that a big tent is really an option for us.
But I guess the general gist, though, Peter, and you guys hit on this in the presentation, is that you are looking into the idea of having classes outside when possible as well.
Right.
Yes.
Forget the tent part of it, you know what I mean?
Correct.
And, Jason Lynn and I Jason Lynn looked at a rental company for a tent to expand some dining areas. But as Peter said, if you look up and down Route 18, every restaurant is buying tents. So there's a demand for outdoor tents. They're hard to come by.
And do the tents come heated? Like we would heat the tents also?
We're actually contemplating tents without walls, so it is something that is generally a fair weather use, because once we drop the sides down for heating, they ostensibly are more like indoor spaces, so we lose the benefit of the exterior ventilation.
Yeah, there's a requirement on the tents and the number of open walls you have. I don't know if it's 2, Marty, or not, but it's certainly not conducive to cold weather.
50% of the sides of the tent has to be open to the air. So, not including the roof, obviously.
Okay. This guy. Has there been talk or possibly having younger level classes loop with their same teacher from last year until we can get back in class? I think it would be difficult for a teacher to get to know new students via online learning. With looping, they would know strengths and weaknesses from the prior year.
I think that's a great thing for us to think about. I want to defer to Chris and Julie or Jonathan.
I think there's lots of research about how looping benefits students and some of the detriments to students of looping with the same teacher. Obviously not in this situation, but over the years. And so sometimes looping can be really helpful and work really well if you have a classroom community that is ready for that. I'm not sure that we today, out of our 475 students at Beaverbrook, that looping with the same teacher would be our best course. For a group of them, it would, but for a group of them, it probably wouldn't be. So that's
Okay. Okay, bus mandates. We opted to not have our child take the bus to free up space for people who need it more. However, if in the second half of the year, if we have a vaccine and if restrictions are lifted, will there be an option to start using the bus again?
Yes. If the transportation restrictions of social distancing, I think yes, we would go back to finding out who would want the bus.
That's, I think, part of the reason you have to renegotiate the level to which you're using buses. Part of that is ensuring that should that happen, those buses, as Felicia said earlier, correct, Felicia?
Yeah.
They're available, which is a question that you asked earlier, Wendy.
Okay. Sorry, I'm reading some of these. Okay, forget it. There's one person that asked me if I'm getting his emails. I am, but I'm ignoring them. So anyway, I'm curious if the pre-K will be following the same guidance as the K through 12. Will the kids be sitting at a desk for the 2.5 hours? Will all the toys, rugs, dress up stuff be removed? Will they be able to play in the playground?
I think we answered most of that except for the playground already.
Right.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about playgrounds? Someone want to take this one?
Yeah, I talked about it when I talked about recess, and that's daily cleaning of touch points, and that would, after a cohort. And
what scientific or medical reason do you have for not committing to fully opening the schools? I'll wait for an answer. Because to this date, there is zero threat to people under the age of 20. If there is concern for teachers, put them in, I can't even, I'm sorry.
So any of these things that aren't getting through, and I appreciate that you're screening them, Wendy, we can answer them, at another time if people want to contact us.
Well, a lot of these, so I already went through all of the questions that basically I had. And so now I'm going through the questions that have been coming at me since we started the meeting. And so I haven't been able to sift through and read these. So some of them aren't very nice. Can't parents opt into permission to streaming, like a release?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Can't parents opt into permission to streaming, like a release? So you had said that, parents may not want to do streaming because of their home.
Potentially, and it's a good question. But there's also the issue of the teacher needing permission. I'm going to continue to say, and I know that you and I may disagree on it, Wendy, that it's not instructionally the best way to deliver information. And none of these are, but it would be diminished significantly. There isn't even an availability of cameras to buy for us because the world has purchased all of those devices during this pandemic. And then the bandwidth and the equity issue. So it's a good question, and it would be a possible way to jump through one of those hoops.
And Peter, I would just add, if all the families that might sign some kind of waiver, all the other kids who would appear on camera or their voices would appear on camera might not have signed the same waiver. So, we would have to have everyone who's participating agree to that change in their confidentiality in the classroom.
will there be any before after school program as planned for with Imagination? And if so, how will that work?
Felicia's been in contact with the provider.
They're not an Abington Public Schools program. They rent space from us, but I've been in contact with Beth around running the program, and they have requirements as well around spacing and number of students, but she's working on her licensing, and from my understanding is that she plans to run a before and after school program at the Woodsdale and Beaverbrook.
Okay. I have 2 children with IEPs, one who's on the spectrum. Will they be prioritized for in-school teaching? I know, James, that you went over that, but then it says, will my son be able to ride the van this year?
Yeah, so we don't make the decision based on disability type. So it could be the case that a student who is on the autism spectrum is prioritized for in-person services, whereas another student whose skills are appropriately developed is not prioritized for in-person services. So we're not basing it entirely on disability type. What we're basing it on is the level of services, of special ed services they receive. Because the more special ed services a student receives, the more significant their disability is. So we really are taking it on a case-by-case basis. But a quick way of referencing whether or not your son or daughter would be prioritized for in-person services would be to ask yourself, does my son or daughter participate in a TLC program, or is my son or daughter's level of service provision in the partial inclusion realm? So that would be a quick that's a quick answer to the first part of their question. And then the second part of the question is that if van transportation is something that's included as part of a student's IEP, then that is something that we would plan to honor in the upcoming school year.
Will there be teachers or staff who travel between schools to instruct students? Do subs travel between school districts?
So we want to limit the amount of travel that we can, but we also want to limit the movement of the cohorts. So there would be more movement of potentially teachers between classes, and there would be some movement of people between buildings. We're a small district trying to provide a really, rigorous program of studies.
High school sports can begin 9/14 per the MIAA. Can high school students still participate in high school sports if a parent chooses a full-time remote learning option?
Well, that's a great question. And let me say this, they've postponed it until the middle of September. It's TBD to find out if it's actually going to happen. And I'm not trying to, I'm the rain cloud because sports and those other activities in our co-curricular are important. I don't know the answer to the remote yet play sports.
Okay, I know that, I'm just throwing this out there. I know that you don't have an answer, but will parents be alerted when athletes, they have been around, display symptoms or test positive, even if athletes are from another town? So just something to think about.
We're not going to be able to tell you who identifies as positive, no matter who it is. We can't violate their privacy. Maybe Marty, do you want to?
Yes, anybody who reports to us or we get a report of a tested positive case, they will be contacted, or the parents of the student will be contacted, and we will do appropriate contact tracing after that. And the only people that will be notified will be those who we absolutely have to.
So how that, I anticipate, and we talked about this last week too, is that if there was someone who tested positive in school, school administrators would work very close with Marty around contact tracing within the school. And then there's an outside of school piece as well.
But we wouldn't be able to tell, I just want to be clear, we would not be able to tell other people about that.
No, the HIPAA laws still apply to all of this medical data.
should the town elect to go with this is something else for imagination. Should the town elect to go with a hybrid model, will Imagination be running? And if it does the student who attends the afternoon program on the days they're in school, they can go to school, or can they also attend on the days that they are not in school?
So that's an independent program. That would need to be a question that's asked of Imagination Academy.
Will parents be able to decide how they are sending their children back to school? Is there a date for parents?
Well, as we covered, they would have that choice between whatever it is Abington chooses and remote.
And do you know when they would have to decide by? If we go back to school September 14th or 16th?
I don't. We'd give people, I think, enough time. We need to know, but we need to start with knowing. We need to start working in a direction of one of these three, either. So, first.
Okay. But when we are talking about buying a seat in a remote program, what remote programs are being looked into and considered? What are the names of these programs?
The state hasn't acquired them yet for me to be able to know. Just as soon as we know, we can make people aware of that.
Okay.
Certainly before people decide. Good question.
And a few thoughts on filming teachers and live streaming. If the camera is parked in one spot, the teacher has to stay in one spot. I've taught and I can't stay in one spot. Major privacy issues for teachers and students. Do we have the money to provide the cameras? And we already went through this.
Great. We know that the cameras aren't available anyway.
Okay. Pertaining to outdoor mask wearing, this week, soccer was reduced to the moderate risk category for activities and is now allowed to scrimmage. I keep hearing that certain people are not following the rules, but in fact, coaches are following the rules and that are being designated by the state. My question again is, why outdoor recreational activities are tiered with varying risk levels with certain activities? Activities such as soccer can now, as of this week, scrimmage unmasked. Baseball, softball, children are within 3 feet when on a base, according to the rules designated by the state. However, children in schools are being held in a higher standard of social distancing and mask wearing. I'm just curious as to why.
I can't answer about the differences between the rules that people have been given. I mean, maybe, Marty is infinitely more qualified to do that. I can just continue to repeat that we have to follow the rules that we've been given. And then I'm going to assume that there are some people that aren't following the rules that people might be comparing our position to.
Okay. Does Abington have an official school start date? I know schools can start later, September 16th, but hasn't been confirmed. I was wondering that too, because we had spoken earlier and you said something about starting September 14th, but then tonight you mentioned the 16th. Do you know?
Oh, I'm sorry if I caused confusion. So we could potentially start on the 16th if the committee voted to push us back. That's the latest that we've been told we could start.
Okay, so will middle school students be leaving the classrooms or will the teachers be moving?
Mr. McCurtain, do you want to? We need to, Rich, could we please unmute Matt?
Sorry, I had some noise in the background, so I muted myself there. As of right now, we're looking at having teachers travel rather than students to limit the ability for kids to cross-contaminate spaces. When students move between spaces, the current guidance asks us to clean those spaces before other students can enter. And that responsibility would fall on teachers and/or students in those quick minutes between classes, which is not something we want our kids to do.
Subject to a collective bargaining agreement.
Correct.
Kids that were just being evaluated before schools closed, how will these evaluations take place this fall?
We're going to have to unmute James, please.
Right. So there are a few options on that. One of which is if one of the evaluations in process was a school psychology evaluation or a speech language evaluation, there's a chance that the evaluator will reach out to your family over the summer to give you the opportunity to have that testing completed then. The remainder of the testing will be completed when school returns in session. And on our first day of school, that will resume the evaluation clock. Because for those who are listening who aren't aware, we have 30 school days to complete the evaluation and a total of 45 school days to then reconvene and discuss the evaluation. The evaluation sessions will be guided by all the social distancing and hygiene and safety requirements that are involved every day of the school year. So the evaluator will be no closer than 3 feet away from the student. The evaluator will wear a mask and the student will be encouraged to do so as well. The area will be sanitized, natural air will be circulating, and any physical materials that the student needs to use will be sanitized beforehand.
Why is the schedule not set up as Monday, Wednesday, Friday for Group A and Tuesday, Thursday for Group B, and then reverse it?
So I think you mean change the days that people would come in a week. I think we remain consistent so that families could have a consistent day of the week that they can count on, that the kids would be in school or remote. That we felt that would be easier on families, actually. Less confusing also.
Go ahead, Felicia. Oh, sorry. Felicia needs to be unmuted.
And I think it's also important about the collaboration day for teachers, planning collaboration. So if students went Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then Tuesday and Thursday, then we wouldn't have that opportunity either.
Disinfected between each cohort use, not just daily.
Sorry, I think you confirmed that after each cohort leaves a room, we have to disinfect the room, and that's true. I mean, before a new cohort comes in.
Has there been a discussion to discontinue kindergarten for the year? Since my understanding is that it's not required in Massachusetts and remote learning is not geared towards the kindergarten skills goals.
No.
If a student or the student's family is determined COVID positive, what quarantine measures and closures, if any, are anticipated, and will families be notified immediately?
So we talked about that a little bit earlier, and so let's say there are a number of cases in a building or in a district. Those are all done in consultation with DPH and our health and our director of health here in Abington. So what that point of closing the whole building or the whole system would really be in consultation with those medical professionals. They haven't provided a specific number or percentage.
Oh, I'm not muted. I haven't been given a number or a percentage positive for either a grade level or a total of the students in the building that tested positive, whether that's broken down by cohort or some other way. I haven't been given that number yet. It is my sincere hope that DPH is working on that number, and when it's more than 2 infections in one location, it's called a cluster. And any cluster of infections, we would seriously consider closing schools down that if a certain threshold is met, and I don't know what that threshold is yet.
Wendy, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, not at all.
I just want to make mention too, a lot of these questions, they're for parents who are listening on July 10th. The Department of Elementary and Secondary had put out a fall reopening frequently asked questions document. It's about 5 pages long, and some of these questions are answered right on the state's website. So I don't know if that's helpful to anyone, but for people who may not get their questions answered this evening due to time constraints, maybe they could check out that tool as well. I just happened to peek at it, and some of the questions that we've answered are on there too.
And they can access that through the PowerPoint in those links that we provided at the beginning. One of them takes you right to the DESE site with all of the resources on it, and that could be found there through our website.
Could we just get an update on about how many questions are left? That's okay.
Wendy, is the plan to read them all? Are you planning on reading all the questions?
I mean, that I was planning on reading all of the questions because, I mean, there's just so many here that I don't know if it's better off if I just send them off to Peter, and he can go through the rest of them with his staff, because there's a lot. There's a lot. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm trying to make the connection between, like, if we were in person, I know there's the public comment section at the beginning of the meeting, which is the public comment has to be in relation to items that are on the agenda. And I know everything you're asking is relative to what's on our agenda. I just don't know I don't know any of the virtual rules, or how long is public comment, or does it go on? I appreciate all these questions. I really do. I know people are really wanting us to get to some, maybe what we're leaning towards. And I know I'm looking at the time.
Yeah, there's 30 more emails, so it would be a long time. Do we have a consensus? Do we want to, I mean, I don't want anybody to think that their question or comment isn't important. So that's the only thing that I struggle with, but I know that Peter would also get back to all these people in a time.
So there's also no guarantee that the people that have emailed these questions are tuned in at this point. And so, I mean, if people want to contact us with questions, I continue to say we're here. It's not like, I mean, tomorrow we'll all be here.
And to clarify, Wendy, I'm just trying to get clarification too. If the question's not read aloud and answered here tonight, the 30 that are remaining will still be answered. So it's just because it's not read aloud doesn't mean their question won't be answered.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay.
Correct. Okay, so we have been going on for what, at least an hour and a half on the questions. I think that's a long time. And I know everyone has a lot to do. So if you want to go on to the next piece, and anybody that's listening at home, your questions will get answered. I'll send them to the appropriate person, or Peter will send it, to Dr. Robbins or someone else if they're better qualified to answer it.
So thank you. I think what you're meaning for me to do is try to get a sense from the committee members what direction they're leaning in terms of these 3 different models.
Right. Are you making a recommendation first, or are we just?
Sure, yes, I'm going to offer that I recommend, the administrative team recommends, after a careful deliberation, the best plan of action for our school community is the hybrid 2-3 model that was referenced earlier in the presentation. And I don't think people want me to repeat myself in terms of that recommendation. I spent part of tonight, really describing that to everybody. So unless people want me to repeat any of that. Okay. So what I'd like to ask of the committee is tonight doesn't need to be a vote. That vote you've indicated you anticipate taking place on August 4th in terms of how we will return. Tonight, I'd like to at least get a sense of the direction from the committee, more in terms of a poll individually, in what direction you feel you would like the Abington Public Schools to head as of July 29th. And again, this will be a part of that submission of the 3 models to DESE that includes what direction the committee is leaning. So if I could maybe go through our committee members and ask them individually to just tell me which one of the 3 you feel the committee as one voice should lean toward, then I would know the feelings and get a sense of our committee. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So just starting with our chair of the 3 models, in person, hybrid, or remote, your feeling in terms of the best plan for tonight.
Okay, so as of today, July 29th, my decision would, I'm actually going to put them in order, and I would be happy if we went in person, then remote, then hybrid. And the reason for in person is, you know, I've definitely done everything that I could to keep my daughter and my feelings for my family out of the situation, because I know we're doing this for the greater good. And every person that I have spoken with to see their kids back in school, everybody on the lacrosse field, the beach, you know, all my friends, anybody that I've talked to, things that I've been reading online, I just feel like that at this point right now, it's best if we try to get our kids back to school. And I think that hybrid is way too confusing for a lot of children and students that, you know, have special ed or have ADHD, that, you know, one day they're going to school and the next day they're not. It's confusing for them and for parents with work. And so that's why hybrid would be my least, you know, option to go with. And then remote, I just want to make sure that we just try to keep everybody on the same page. So that would be my second choice. So in person, remote, and hybrid.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Lisa, Augusta?
I don't know that I have a ranking order per se for them, but obviously this comes with a lot of thought in, and I think that the different models have different benefits or pros and cons, disadvantages. So I think it's a hard decision to make. I think at this point today, my decision would be a hybrid model. I just feel, and I don't know, and I don't think any of us know, but I feel like, unfortunately, at some point, I think we're going to end up being full remote based on how the world is going. And I feel like a hybrid model would give the kids an opportunity to have some in person and then, you know, have some preparation for a remote model if that's where we actually end up. So that's where I'm leaning right now.
Thank you. Jackie?
I'm going to follow Wendy's lead in the as of today comment part. So as of today, July 29th, I think we would all agree that teaching and learning is best done in person. Being remote is way harder for everyone. Students first, families second, and I'll put teachers last for the sake of this argument. As a school committee member, I've agonized over this. I obviously wear a variety of hats. So I've taken what's the best, worst option for our community, and it's been eating at me. Despite what people might think, I've actually removed my teacher hat during this process quite a bit and have sort of wrestled with some hard questions that have been asked of me, such as how are we different? We teachers different than any employees at the grocery store, or what makes it okay for doctors and nurses to go to work but not us? And at times those questions have made me feel ashamed as a teacher, like I should feel bad that I am trying to say that I don't want to go back to work. And I want to be clear that I as a teacher want to go back to work. We as teachers want to go back to work. I can't teach other people's children while simultaneously teaching my own from my house. The people in this community who have helped take care of my kids so that I could work as a teacher, I'm deeply appreciative of. So I need the schools to reopen. But this is going to be my 17th year in education, I've taught every grade K through 5. I've been a classroom teacher. I've been a special education service provider. I've been a reading teacher. I've been a coach whose job is to ensure that we provide the best instructional practices to kids so that they can learn the academic skills and to grow as people while they're there. And so people on this team, you know that I ran for school committee for one reason, really. I don't like excuses. And when it comes to doing what's best for kids. I've been to these people countless times, the people who are here working for you tonight. I've been to them and I have asked them repeatedly for more and for better. And I've made some enemies at times by asking for that. And so this is what I know. I can assure you, with that 17 years of experience behind me, that if this 81-page document wasn't here in our way, I would be voting for us to go back in person. But because of that 81-page document, which contains unworkable guidelines for educators and for students, it's not good for kids. I'll be choosing the remote model because the harm that we're doing, putting kids back 2 days per week, and the risk we run for people's health, not only the logistical part, if the science says that we, the people here, cannot yet meet in the building to do this planning, I can't put my brain around how we bring more people in. That's a disconnect for me. So to answer the question about the fields and the sports, I don't know. I don't know why we aren't allowed back in yet, but the kids and the teachers are. So that long answer, my vote is for remote.
Thank you. Danielle Grafton.
Hey, everybody. The decision that we've been asked to make will be a highly unpopular one, no matter what the outcome is. But the reality is that not making a decision is not an option, no matter how much we dislike the 3 situations on the table. After tonight, we need to really come together as a community and move forward, supporting each other the best we can to keep our staff and students safe and still deliver the best possible education we can to our children. These are the 2 factors we needed to keep in mind while making our decision. Delivering the best possible education to me means going back to school and being together in a classroom as much as possible. So much of the success of any given year comes directly from the community we create and the routines that we establish together in those first few weeks and months of every school year. I would love to go back in full, at least for a few weeks, and I've spent hours, like all of the committee members, agonizing over this. I've spent hours and hours trying to will going back in full to work, but same in this moment on July 29th, I can't reconcile going back in full with the information that we've been presented. I mentioned last week that despite valiant, enormous efforts by educators in Abington and everywhere, remote learning from March to June was not what we need it to be to deliver the best possible education. If we can safely get back into our schools for some face-to-face in-person instruction, even if it's only for a few days a week, for a few weeks or months, and even if we only have student desks in that room, I believe we will deliver a better learning experience for our students. I have so much more to say about this, but I'll save it for the final decision next week. On July 29th today, I think hybrid is the best option for us.
Thank you. Chris Coyle.
Can you hear me okay? I lost my internet, so I had to jump on my phone. Okay, thanks. So I'm going to get right to it. I think we all know how difficult that remote learning was.
Chris, I don't know if you can hear us. We lost you.
Is that any better? All right, I'm sorry. So I don't know what you heard, but basically, like, we all know how difficult the remote learning was. I heard from many parents and staff this in the spring. I know if we do it again, we'll do it much better. That said, the parent results from both surveys, from the one that was taken 2 weeks ago to the one that ended yesterday, both show remote as being the least favorable option for the community. When I was elected, I wanted to do what was best for the community, and as well as myself, as well as what I thought was best for everyone.
The transportation aspect gave me the most pause in the terms of the 45 minutes that students would miss on either end of it. However, when I factor in the hybrid model, has the students home for over 100 days, and the amount of lost time, learning time that will be there will, in my opinion, outweigh the 45 minutes they'll miss. If we don't have a reduction in bus riders, my lean right now, as everybody else has said, in 6 days that may change, is to be full in person.
So what I have is 2 in person, 2 hybrid, and 1 remote. And so we don't obviously have a clear consensus of the group, but I've taken a poll, and you know, Massachusetts has had this local control of this decision, and that's what I'll communicate to the Department of Education with this submission on July 31st. And obviously we'll be back on August 4th for a committee meeting. And what's been communicated by the committee to me is that's the night that you will make more of a final designation. Again, that will be as of August 4th, because we all know it's the trajectory of this virus that's driving the options. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Does anyone else have any further questions or comments?
I mean, quick one, Peter, what happens if it's not a majority in 6 days from now? Do you know?
I'm sorry, guys. We're gonna have to add that to the list of things I can't answer.
Okay. All right.
At least I'm smart enough to say I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe with more information that comes out from the state or DESE, we can finalize our plan. And August 4th is the day. So I want to thank everyone. I want to thank all of the people out there in the community for hanging with us. And I'm sorry if your question wasn't answered, but it will be then very soon. So thank you all. And I don't know, is that it?
We need a motion to adjourn.
Right. So if everybody's okay with that though? Okay. So would anyone like to make the motion to adjourn the meeting for tonight?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
night.